People give their money expecting it to be used for charitable purposes. And then when it's not, the public is even more outraged. My wife's sister-in-law talked about a priest that she knew that was a distant relative who stole $1 million from his parish, fled the parish, and went to jail and got his job back.
And got his job back.
I was like, something went wrong. Can we understand what the triggers were? What interested me was the pressure on the part of the priest. But where does the pressure come from? That's really what was my hook. Connecticut has a lot of money. And so if your parishioners are rich and you're not making that much money, priests don't make that much money. They go into it knowing they're not making much money. But when you get ordained at 26, that's very different when you're 56. And now you want to go play golf, and now you want a golf club membership, or you want to go on vacation, or you want a boat. Now, when you go to, especially when you go to casino, it's about you, right? When you're baptizing, when you're celebrating mass, it's sick calls. It's never about you. You're hearing confession. It's not about you. When you go to the casino, you sit down, they give you a drink, you play. It's about you. And so he gambled about $650,000, pled guilty, goes to federal prison, takes his medicine, gets out, and is now a high-ranking official at Eastern Rite Diocese.
Are you serious? And so he's a meth dealer, and he has partial ownership in an adult bookstore.
That is what the court records reflect. And he ends up in federal prison only because he can't stay off the drug. He got addicted himself. Breaking Bad meets the Bells of St. Mary's. Because when that gentleman got ordained up in Connecticut, he never thought one day he'd be sentenced for being a drug dealer.
So the benefit of your research, and the reason I think you're providing a great service to the church, is because you're seeing some causation here and what we could do to help improve that situation.
Correct. That's a great way to put it.
Does all this stuff dampen your faith?
No, not at all. The Catholic Church is a great institution. It brings salvation to the people. And really, the job of the church is to reform me. It's not my job to reform the church. But this is just my little gift to the church, so to speak, in order to maybe help them and revise some things. And hopefully all this helps.
Dr. Robert Warren, thank you so much for being here. This is a pretty interesting topic. I don't know if exciting is the right word, because you are the world expert, I guess, on financial malfeasance or financial mismanagement, corruption, misappropriation in the Catholic Church, particularly here in America. And surprisingly, there's a whole lot of it, which we're going to get into. But I wanted to first start by saying, when you were a little boy, did you say, I want to be the world expert in financial mismanagement in the Catholic Church?
No, but at the age of 9, I knew I wanted to work for the IRS.
Wow, that is weird, because most people just want to play baseball or be a firefighter.
No, it's a quick story. My mom had a bunch of long-term friends kept to her death, and one of them married an IRS agent who in 1975 came out to the house for dinner. And he had long hair and a beard and all that. He looked like Jesus. And he started the prayer in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Commissioner. And my parents thought that was great. And my parents were very pious people. They were pretty good.
And the Commissioner.
And they thought that was great. And he was a CPA. And I thought to myself, that must be a big deal. Because my parents thought this guy was a big deal. Because he worked for the IRS and was a CPA.
Right.
And that's goes from there.
Well, the building you're sitting in, there is a legendary story, but from what I understand, it's true. There was an IRS agent that came in here one time to challenge my grandfather on something, and back in those days, you could literally physically pick up the IRS agent and throw him out of the building, which my grandfather did. So he was never a very big fan. And then my dad went off to get his LLM in tax from Georgetown because he just wanted to fight with the IRS agents.
Right.
So, but on that note,
okay.
Let me just kind of mention a few highlights from your resume, your curriculum vitae, which is extensive. I mean, it's really quite impressive. But it begins with education from University of Maryland, Bachelor of Science in Accounting. You get an MBA from University of Maryland, and then you get a doctorate of business administration, which I don't meet too many of those. So that's really pretty cool. And that's where the Dr. Warren comes in. You spent time working at the IRS in the criminal investigation division. You were a senior analyst, you were a special agent. So we are now beginning to see, like, you had a real secular professional training in financial fraud cases, criminal investigation cases. What else? You've received countless awards, teaching awards, Professor of the Year from Radford University last year. Congrats.
Yeah, Bait Offside. That's right.
Best Education Paper Award from different places. The Albert Gallatin Award for Public Service. When you were at the IRS Chief Executive Excellence Award, I mean, Chief's Excellence Award 2016, IRS Performance Award, basically every year you were there. It goes on and on. You have published countless papers. You've given countless presentations, book chapters. It goes on and on. And recently you've been a professor. You've been teaching you've taught at the Catholic University where I went to law school, and we have many, many mutual friends. Shout out to both of our good friends, Bob Sirkovich, because he was a great mentor of mine. He was a wonderful man who actually is an expert in all the tax stuff.
Sure.
But right before we started recording, you mentioned that you've known him for years.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I love Bob. I love Bob. We have many, many other friends in the DC area. I'm friends with your brother-in-law and your sister, who are wonderful people. So anyway, I'm very grateful you're here. And most recently, you're teaching at Radford University. You're teaching financial accounting, managerial accounting. But throughout all of this, you have done something that's quite remarkable. You have kind of built the leading database of all kinds of financial fraud cases within the church in America. And it's kind of an amazing thing to see what you've done. So with all that kind of intro, talk to us a little bit about how in the world did you end up in this kind of expertise within the church?
Well, that's interesting. So I started with the IRS in 1991 as a revenue agent, which is a civil auditor. So you go through all the tax training, they send you out to do audits. And then in 1993, I got selected as a special agent, went down to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center and went through their 18-week training program and became a special agent. And actually, it's kind of funny. The reason I went to the IRS is I wanted to get married. And the young lady said I needed a job because I was in graduate school at the time. And so I remember back to that, when I told you before, that 9-year-old dream. And they were hiring, thank God, at the time. So I spent 25 years at the IRS and retired. So anyway, so when I came out of special agent training, I was put on a case against the former president of United Way of America and two former chief financial officers. All three were Catholic, believe it at the time. And all three special agents on the case were Catholic. It's really kind of funny that way.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my introduction to
small little Catholic world.
It was. And one of the gentlemen who was the defendant came up to me after I testified and said, "Look, you look familiar. I think I was behind you in line at confession." And he told me where. And I was like, I got to have more situational awareness because that was him.
Wow.
Good thing. So for what it's worth.
Yeah.
And that was my introduction to nonprofit fraud, which is really interesting because people think of fraud, they think of a business. The business isn't reporting money. But United Way of America was a nonprofit. And so people give their money expecting it to be used for charitable purposes. And then when it's not, the public is even more outraged because, okay, some rich guy's cheating. We expect that. But we gave money for a charitable purpose and it didn't go to that. That's when they really start getting outraged. So in my time at IRS, I did kind of have a little niche in nonprofit frauds. Okay, so I retire in 2016 and I'm at Catholic U teaching. And I'm also going to doctoral studies at Case Western where I got my doctorate. And I'm about a year out of IRS. You know, I'm used to just investigating every day. You know, I need something. I need a hobby. And my wife's sister-in-law, talked about a priest that she knew that was a distant relative who stole $1 million from his parish, fled the parish, and went to jail, and got his job back.
And got his job back.
I was like, no, I didn't know. My wife has a lot of siblings. And in fact, our mutual friend, he's actually married to one of my wife's siblings. So it's not my sister, it's my sister-in-law. And I said, no, it can't be right. And so I write the clerk of the court where he was prosecuted. I say, I'd like the file. So I write for $20. I got 20 pages of really interesting reading. And then I read it, and darn it, the guy didn't steal $1 million from his parish, flee the parish. He took up in a New York City apartment with a close male friend and his dog.
Close male friend.
And people can read into it whatever they want.
Yeah.
And then the police get involved because father's missing. Was he kidnapped? Who knows? No note. And so the cops trace him to this apartment in New York City, knock on the door, and he's not there. But then the father comes in, and his close male friend did not know he was a priest. And he gives an interview to the police. Now, you're an attorney. You know when the cops show up and read you your rights, you should probably not say anything.
Yeah.
But he did speak. And that landed him in state prison. So he talks to the bishop. The bishop says, if you can get out of prison, we'll send you to St. Luke's, the hospital for clergy in D.C., and then we'll put you in hospital ministry. And so that resulted in a parole hearing. His parole was coming up. So I was able to get an audio of the parole hearing, which is really interesting. Because then he explains his side of the story. And then he gets out, he goes to St. Luke's, and then he's returned to ministry after stealing $1 million. Now, I don't know if there's a repayment plan. So then I write the bishop and I say, hey, can I have his personnel file, parts of his personnel file? Can I have any internal investigations? And they obviously say no. And so I have about 120 of these cases, give or take. Mm-hmm. And then what my standard practice is to get all the public records. And then I write the bishop for any internal investigations, any forensic accounting reports. And I also want their personnel record, where they went to school. I mean, a lot of personnel records are not public, and we understand that. But where they went to school, when they were ordained, what their parish assignments were. It's really not private information. But the bishops have been very reticent to give that up. And in this case, the bishop was also. So that was one of the 6 Connecticut cases I have. There's a disproportionate number from Connecticut.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know whether there's something, whether it's an older population of priests. I don't know. My current theory is that Connecticut has a lot of money, right? It's a suburb in New York City, lots of money up there, lots of insurance companies, lots of people making money. And the priests may feel they need to keep up with the Joneses. Mm. And so if your parishioners are rich and you're not making that much money, priests don't make that much money. They go into it knowing they're not making much money. But when you get ordained at 26, that's very different when you're 56. And now you want to go play golf, and now you want a golf club membership, or you want to go on vacation, or you want a boat. So I think there's a disproportionate amount of money in Connecticut. And I don't know whether their ordination standards are maybe laxer than other places, or maybe their oversight is laxed. Mm-hmm. I mean, you had another case of a priest in Connecticut who was, it was a really interesting case. It was like the case of Breaking Bad meets the Bells of St. Mary's.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Where a priest at the cathedral, he was a rector of the cathedral. So when you're a rector of the cathedral, you're pretty trusted, right? That's a good gig.
Yeah.
A close male friend introduced him to, I think it was methamphetamine. Mm-hmm. And he decides to take a leave of absence and become a distributor of said product. And so he's living in one apartment, and he's selling his illicit drugs out of another. And then he sells it to a DEA undercover agent. And then he gets caught. So then he goes to federal court, pleads guilty, gets probation. And he can't stay off the dope. Mm. And so he's finally put in prison because he's flunking the drug tests. And his plan was to earn money, distributing said narcotic, and then running his proceeds, his illicit proceeds, laundering it through, for lack of a better term, an adult bookstore.
Okay.
That he was a partner in.
So this is a priest?
Yeah, but at least he did it while he was on leave.
Okay, so he's on leave, and so he's a meth dealer, mm-hmm. and he has partial ownership in an adult bookstore. That
is what the court records reflect.
Oh, my gosh.
And he ends up in federal prison only because he can't stay off the drug. He got addicted himself. Mm-hmm. He can't stay off it.
Now, I want to pause here for a second, because we're going to tell many more stories.
Sure.
We're still kind of in the beginning of this. And for people who are already sitting here wondering, like, why are we going through these stories? Mm-hmm. And I think it's actually very important to go through some of these, because one of the questions I have, like, at the end of this, I'm just going to go ahead and ask now, like, the purpose of people knowing these stories, the purpose mm-hmm. of you researching these things is not out of some kind of prurient interest of these people falling apart. It is what? It is to help the church improve its safeguards and controls and financial management structures and accountability to help these men and sisters or any church employee stay in line. And that historically, our regulations in the church have stunk, and it has allowed people to go off the reservation or on the reservation and gamble a lot, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
But the reason to research this, the reason to figure out the common threads, which we're going to get to, the reason to have a former IRS criminal investigator looking into these things is to help Holy Mother Church improve her situation. Am I right?
Correct. And to also help priests flourish. Because when that gentleman got ordained up in Connecticut, he never thought one day he'd be sentenced for being a drug dealer. Something went wrong. Can we understand what the triggers were? That's the question. That's where we get into. We're going to talk a little bit later about the fraud triangle.
Yeah.
So it's to how do we strengthen internal controls, which are important, and then how do we help our clergy flourish? So especially when they hit middle-aged, how do we help them overcome to really be the best clergy they can be?
Yeah, and when we get into that part in the triangle, and that's really cool, the fraud triangle is just really kind of a neat thing. But your research has shown some common threads that run through this stuff. And there's a lot of gambling. There's a lot of middle-aged kind of perhaps crisis going on. There's a lot of moral licensing going on where they feel entitled. So the benefit of your research, and the reason I think you're providing a great service to the church, is because you're seeing some causation here and what we could do to help improve that situation.
Correct. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. All right. So we jumped into a few stories, but let's kind of zoom out. And now that my audience hears, why the hell am I doing this? Like, and that's why I don't want to just like badmouth the church and bad priests. I want to help show there's a better way to do some of this stuff. So we talked sort of about the motivation of your research and kind of how you got into this whole area. But I think we just mentioned the fraud triangle. Kevin, can you pull up the fraud triangle on the screen? And this is something that I guess all criminal investigators with the IRS know. So you have taken this kind of well-known tool and kind of applied it to the work that you do here in regards to the clergy and whatnot. So why don't you take this little graph that we threw up here and explain the fraud triangle? There's lots of images. We just pulled one of them. There's many different graphics.
Yeah.
Tell us about what this is and how you have used this to begin your investigation into the church scandal.
All right. Thank you. The fraud triangle really is the most enduring theory in forensic accounting we have. It came out in 1953, Dr. Creasy. And it's the seminal theory. So to have a theory that's 70 plus years later is still relevant is really kind of neat. Okay, so the fraud triangle says that there are three things you need for a crime, for financial crime. You have crimes of passion, but we're not worried about that now. One is you got to have the opportunity to commit the crime. You may want to commit the crime, but if you don't have the opportunity, you're not going to commit the crime. Okay, priests and clergy members have the opportunity to commit the crime because they have access to the finances of the parish. They have access to the checkbook. They have access to credit cards. They have access to cash. So we know priests, especially diocesan priests, and the vast majority of my case, I think I have 4 religious order priests in the study. Okay. The second is pressure. Now,
well, hang on.
Go ahead.
So you just said that a minority are religious. Is that because they're not usually pastors of churches, or is it because they live in community, or is it because their brother, they've taken a vow of poverty, and so people are kind of checking them out to make sure they don't have a boat or a nice car? That's a key little factor there. So just elaborate a little bit on why such a small percentage are religious.
Sure. Well, if you're a religious brother, if you're a religious teaching brother, and there are 4 brothers in the study, if you're a religious brother or a religious priest and you're teaching, you don't have the opportunity.
That's why,
the first thing. If you're a parish priest, you have the opportunity. There was a Palatine priest in Baltimore in the 1970s. He's long since dead. I won't mention the name, but he's long since dead. He was in charge of the mail order operation for the Palatines. You send out pictures of people who need help. People send in money. And he was a member of like the National Mail Order Association or something like that. And so he had access to lots and lots of cash. So he had a nice car. He went on trips. He misused money for his own personal purposes. Now, granted, that's a religious order priest. He's not in a parish, but he has access to all this cash coming in from donations. And back in the 70s, people would still put cash in the envelope.
Cash, yeah.
Okay. The pressure is the deal with the poverty comes more with pressure.
And this is the second part of the triangle.
Yes. So the opportunity is more these religious order priests probably don't have the opportunity. Now, the opportunity also comes along is if you're living in common. So you're not going to have the opportunity to steal if you're living in common. And well, if I take that money or if I buy a boat, a father's going to see it.
Right.
You know, I used to joke that if a friar goes out and buys a Mercedes and brings it back to the friary, the first thing the friar is going to know is where's their car? And they're not going to wonder how you got it. They want to know where theirs is. And by the way, can we drive it? Then everybody's talking to the guardian. Hey, I want to drive the new Mercedes. Then the guardian's like, where'd you get the money? All right, so you're not going to have the opportunity to conceal that. Okay. The second is pressure. And this is what drove me to kind of research it first. Because even if you don't vow poverty, I think there's an implicit promise, even among diocesan clergy, that they're going to live simply. Right? You know on the day you get ordained that you're not going to make a lot of money. If anybody thinks they are, you better think twice. But what the church promises is not only great rewards in the afterlife or the next life, which I'm sure they certainly deserve, but you're going to get a salary. It's not going to be much, but you're going to have a salary. You're going to have health care. You're going to have a pension. It'll be small, but you can have a pension. You're going to get a car allowance. You're going to get a food allowance. When you retire, you can live at a parish. We'll find a place for you to live. So your basic needs are all met. You're never going to be on the street starving. That's kind of the deal. You're not going to live in poverty. You're going to be okay, but you're not going to earn enough to have your own house, let's say.
Do you know what typical salaries are for priests?
Cara did a study a couple years ago, and really the top diocesan salary is around $60,000 a year.
That's the top.
Now, granted, that's the salary. Now, the housing allowance, let's say they live at the rectory.
It's free.
Right? If, let's say you're in a place that doesn't have a rectory, they're going to give you money to rent an apartment or whatever. They're going to provide housing. Okay. Now, the housing is tax exempt from income taxes, but not Social Security. So there is some payment for that. You're going to have a food allowance, right? Again, not much, but it'll be enough to feed you. Now, let's flip it around. Let's say you're a religious order priest. And I remember talking, I had a case on a fundraiser for a Catholic organization. We're going back in the 2000s. Okay. And he was a layperson. And I remember talking to the person who did the finances for the religious order that he was working for. I say, well, how do you got guys all across the United States. How do you handle, like, if they need like a pair of socks or something? Because they're like in a parish. He says, everybody's got a credit card, and I review the credit card statements. You need a pair of socks. You need to put gas in the car, that sort of stuff. You put it on the card. Then at the end of the month, I get the bill. Now, he gets the salary from the diocese, but they're looking at the credit cards. So if he sees a guy going out to Ruth's Chris every day, you got a problem, let's say. You're like, well, if a guy wants to go to Subway every day, we got the money. He's doing his job. Okay, I'll let him do it. But there's a control there, but the religious order priest gets what he thinks he wants, right? I don't think a diocesan priest, if he wants to go out to Subway every day, that's on his own dime. He has food at the rectory, let's say. There was a priest in California, the diocesan priest. This is a great example. Diocesan priest in California has his own house, and he wants the NFL package. Now, if you're living at a friary and you want the NFL package, you go to the head guy. We like the NFL package. It's Sunday. It's our day. Okay, you get the NFL package. He has to steal money from the parish to get the NFL package at his personal house. Now, at the rectory, would they have paid for the NFL package? I don't know whether they're allowed to do it or not. But parishes are not allowed to set the salary for their pastors or associate pastors. That's made by the diocese.
It's stupid. All he had to do was find a football fan in his parish, and they would have bought it for him.
Yeah. But he wants.
Imagine your pastor saying, "Hey, Rob, I love baseball.
Yeah.
Can you get me the MLB package, for Christmas?" You'd be like, "Sure, man, just do it." Like, it's so easy to get. They don't have to steal.
But also if you're in a religious world like the friars, you're sitting around watching football maybe on a Sunday with your family.
Yeah.
The diocesan priest is alone watching the foot. Maybe that's a better reason to go and watch it with parishioners or with other priests. Okay, so there's more. What interested me was the pressure on the part of the priest, because one would think they don't have kids, they don't have a spouse, unless you're like Eastern Rite, and there are some married Catholic priests and who are like Anglicans and they switched over. I understand all that, but where does the pressure come from? That really was my hook. And then the third is rationalization. So most people, when they do something wrong, they have to justify it to themselves. Very few of us say, I did, it was wrong, it was my fault. And that's the great thing about confession. You got to get in there and you got to say it's my fault. And you can, maybe there's some sort of circumstances you should tell the priest. You can, obviously, it's mitigation. But in the end, the great thing about confession is you don't rationalize. I did it, it's my fault, I need forgiveness. But with people, that's a hard thing for people to do. Most people don't do that. If they do something wrong, they have to rationalize why I do it. And the vast majority of rationalizations we saw was what we call moral licensing, which means I do so much good, I'm underpaid, I deserve it. So I'm just going to get what I deserve. And I have to do that by stealing. So it's sort of like if you lose 20 pounds, now you got a right to eat a sundae. Right? You've done something good, now I can do something bad. And we found that in more cases than I wish I did. And then some priests were addicts. They were either gambling addicts or they had an alcohol issue or both. And I found when you're dealing with addicts, rationalization really doesn't come into play. It's hard to rationalize with an addict. They need their fix, so they're going to get the fix. So there was a case in the Midwest of, they called him the riverboat priest. A priest stole $300,000 from his parish and went and gambled it away. Now, he was fine till he went to a parish. He was in diocesan, frontline ministry, like vocation director. He was fine. When he went to a parish and was alone, he started gambling. And he just needed his gambling fix. And that's when he stole from the parish. Now, in that case, he got caught. He did time in local lockup. He pleaded guilty, made a payment plan with the diocese, and got returned to ministry as an assistant pastor with no control over the money. And thankfully, he's just celebrated his 25th anniversary a couple years ago as a priest, and gave a homily. And the thesis of the homily was why I returned. And if you look on the parish, his bio on the parish, he said, I did time. I did time for gambling. He's very upfront about it. And he goes to Gamblers Anonymous, which I think is a great way to handle that. Very upfront, no excuses. I'm an addict. You got a question, let me know.
What percentage of these cases that you've worked? So we just went through the triangle: opportunity, pressure, rationalization, and you gave a little example of each one. Yeah. Anything to tie off the triangle, or is that that's the summary of the triangle?
That is a summary of the triangle, but the biggest thing is you need all three. Like if you have the opportunity to steal and no pressure, you're not going to do it. If you have the opportunity and the pressure, but you can't rationalize it, the theory is you're not going to steal. But particularly if you don't have the opportunity. And a lot of the solutions I talk about, say in the pillar, talks about how do we keep them from temptation. How do we remove the opportunity?
Hey, thanks guys for checking out the Conor Gallagher Show. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, or comment, or whatever you got to do to support it. And I appreciate that very much.
So given this fraud triangle and given all the research you've done, it seems like many of the examples you give have to do with gambling. Do you have any concept of like what percentage that is? It's a growing percentage. Like how does that factor in as a theme running through all this?
It's very consistent. I think in my paper, I talk about those who the only problem was gambling. But if you include gambling as part of the issue and maybe the only issue, the driving issue, I think you're talking about 1 out of 4. Wow. Now, there were 5 sisters in my study. 5. All had gambling problems. Really? All had gambling problems. Now, all came from orders that did not wear the habit. All were not, there were 2 teachers, but all were not living in big communities. if I can give you an example, and again, no names, the former, but people can figure it out, the former CFO of Siena College in New York, religious sister, I forgot the name of the order, steals $700,000 from Siena. Basically, she had a credit card, she went to casinos, and she would just withdraw cash, from the ATMs. They ought to ban ATMs at casinos. So she withdraws and spends about $700,000 or $800,000 in cash from the casino.
How long would that take?
It was a couple of years. It took a couple of years.
That's a lot of money per year.
That's a lot of money. Well, it wasn't in total. I mean, it's not $700,000 per year. It was just
but
over a period of time. I think it was a couple of years. Now, the only reason she was caught was Siena College files a 990 because it's a college. College had to file 990s, and on the 990, if you've been the victim of a theft, you got to check the box. So then a newspaper got the 990, saw the box checked. And now they want to know why. And they start asking questions. Now, that's when it came out, and that's when the government got involved, and she was prosecuted federally.
Wait, so there's a nun going to a casino, swiping the college credit card or the religious order's credit card?
I think it was college credit card.
College credit card. Playing blackjack or whatever it is she's doing. Losing big time over a handful of years. Cranking up $700,000.
I think it was 7, maybe 8. I think it was 7.
$800,000 of losses. And so then somebody at the college got onto this and said, we've had our money
stolen. We've had a theft. The auditors caught it.
Did they fire her? Like, what happened to her?
She definitely got fired. She got fired. The question is, do you get prosecuted?
Right. And so the only reason it got prosecuted is a journalist saw there was a theft. Journalist gets involved. Then a state attorney gets involved.
Well, then the federal government gets involved.
U.S. attorney.
It's fuzzy why all of a sudden after the federal government gets involved after that. I don't know whether the journalist published an article or what the deal is. Look, when I was a special agent, I always looked in the paper every day because sometimes you would find the United Way case started because of a newspaper article, and an agent is reading the newspaper every day and sees the article.
Yeah.
So I've gotten some great cases out of the newspaper. And that's when the federal government gets involved, and she pleads guilty. She's fired. She pleads guilty. She goes back to the main mother house or whatever. And her excuse to the court was she was medicating against a childhood trauma.
Rationalization?
That's the rationalization. Now, if she really had a childhood trauma that needed care, I am sure the order would have gotten her care. She was not a young woman. The order would have paid for her care. Why do you really have to go to the blackjack table to mitigate something from childhood?
Now, you did say that the 5 religious sisters in your study they did not wear habits, and it would be a lot harder if Sister Mary Jane in a full habit was going into the casino every night.
That'd be something. So
she would stick out like a sore thumb. It's actually that public scandal would probably prevent it from escalating anymore, because eventually they start saying, why is this nun here every day? Like the people at the casino probably didn't even know that this lady was a nun.
Correct. And there was 2 nuns out in Torrance, California, and this is all public, the principal and the vice principal. They were the same religious order. I believe they lived together. I don't think they lived with other members of the order, but they lived behind a gated townhouse community, and they each had Volvos. You say to yourself, if I was a parishioner, it's kind of odd. But they stole about $800,000 from the school because the school had a bank account people forgot about. They switched banks. There was one account. They knew about it, and everybody else forgot. And they would park money in that from the school in that account, and they use that as their fund to pay for the Volvos and to go to Las Vegas to gamble. Now, the parishioners knew she was going to Vegas to gamble, or that both of them were going to Vegas to gamble. The cover story was one nun was from somewhere in Asia, and the cover story was she had a rich uncle who paid for their gambling junkets.
Wow.
And that was the cover story.
Yeah.
So then, as it happens with a lot of these cases, they retire. When you retire, now you don't have any access to the records, and that's when things start coming out. So the principal turns, I think, 79 or 80, and then retires. Now, the parishioners are incensed. One of the reasons they're incensed was sister said they didn't have $8,000 in the school to build an awning to protect their kids from the sun in the morning. It's Southern California, it gets hot. That is one thing they focused on.
Mm-hmm. So they run through hundreds of thousands of dollars
In years.
And,
Probably been 20 years maybe. I can't remember.
And they don't have $8,000 to put awnings up for the kids.
That's what really frosted
That'll piss off a lot of people there.
Now, her rationalization, by the way, is, by the way, they only prosecuted the principal. They didn't prosecute the vice principal. I don't know why. Her rationalization was the priest at the parish has less responsibility than her, but she gets paid less. In fact, she's a sister. You're without poverty. She's not getting paid anything.
The
it's going to the order.
Yeah.
And if the order is not happy with the salary she's making, they could say to the school, sister needs more. We need more money for sister, or sister's going to retire. Mm-hmm. But that's the rationalization.
Did any of these sisters gambling? We'll get to priests in a minute. But did any of these sisters, or did all 5 sisters in your study gamble?
Yes,
okay.
That was the primary thing.
And did any of them go to jail?
Oh, yeah. The sister in Torrance went to jail. The sister in Siena College went to jail. Now, we're talking a year and a day. Mm-hmm. Now, in the federal system, so in other words, I think the second sister in Torrance did not get prosecuted. So now you're down to 4. The principal went to jail. The CFO went to jail. There were 2 other sisters. I think one of them did time, but I'm not sure. I'd have to double check it. I've gotten so many. I started this in 2017. Now I'm going to forget stuff. Yeah. But generally, the sentences are very light. So in the federal system, you get a year and a day. That's like the gold sentence. You get a year, you serve a year. You get a year and a day, you can get 15% off good time. So now you're down to, 8 months or whatever. They're going to put you in a community confinement to get you back into society maybe one month before. You can take classes and like drug rehab classes, stuff, knock off some more time. And you're going to a minimum security prison. Mm-hmm. So if you get a year and a day, you're probably doing 6 months.
Right.
But there was a priest in New Jersey who got sentenced to 7.5 years for stealing $1.5 million.
From?
His parish in the Diocese of Mechuchen. I can't remember the name of it. It starts with an M. It's a small diocese in Jersey. From his parish, longtime pastor. He got sentenced to 7.5 years. And you're thinking, oh man, they threw the book at him. No, in Jersey, if you get sentenced to 7 years, you're eligible for parole in 18 months.
Really?
Yeah. And then COVID hits. It's a state prison. Big difference between state and feds. So he does 18 months. So he's going to do 18 months really. And then COVID hits. So now you're down to 6 months. So he steals $1.5 million. They can only sentence him for $800,000 because of statute of limitations. And then he does 6 months.
Goodness. He got off easy.
Yeah, he has to, quote, repay the money, but he's 71 years old.
Yeah.
With health issues.
So gambling, what are some of the other examples of how, you talk about the nuns, but how the priests, the other people in your studies, I guess like the other 90 or something in your study.
About gambling?
Gambling, like there's some, like, it's hard for me. I don't have a gambling problem, so it's hard for me to get that.
Right.
But it, I would think, could be completely wrong, but just in the general world, that if you're living alone and you're isolated and you're lonely, gambling is easier to slip into versus like if I'm gambling, my wife's going to know real darn quick. She knows more about our income, than I do.
Right.
And if I'm disappearing and going to a casino or racking up credit card bills on my phone, playing some stupid game, she's going to know it in a heartbeat.
Yes.
So, now if she was doing it, I'd have no idea. I'd just go broke. Hope my wife doesn't have a gambling problem. But, actually, I know she would. If she was gone, I would say, wait a minute, where's my wife? We can't survive without her. Where is she? She's at the casino. It's so weird for me to grasp people doing this. But if you're a priest, you're alone, you disappear every night going to the casino. No one knows. No one knows. So what other kind of gambling problems are there? Why do they slip into this? And what are they doing? Are they going to casinos? Are they doing it on their phone? Like, how does this look? What does this look like in real life? I'll
give you an example of both. One is a priest out of Las Vegas. So if you have a gambling problem, you don't want to be in Vegas. You don't want to be in the Diocese of Vegas.
No.
So
you don't.
This priest.
If you have any problem, you don't want to be in Vegas. Okay.
So the priest was pastor of a parish, large. I've been to mass at that parish. Parish with a school, large parish, good amount of money, away from the strip, obviously. Normal, just kind of normal middle class families, very busy, multiple masses, lots of pressure. And I think he was also the chancellor of the diocese, if I remember correctly, or had a high-level position in the diocese, then transfers to be a parish pastor. He baptized Celine Dion's kids.
Oh, really?
That was his claim to fame.
Oh.
So I'm sure there's other claims to fame, but that's what when I read the court
Celine
records.
Dion's kids?
Yeah, the
singer. Yeah, sure.
Well, I guess she had kids and when she was in Vegas and got baptized there.
All right.
Okay. He gambles about $650,000 online. Online. Now, what happens here, I get most of the rationalizations. The federal court system is great because all the records are online. So I've never actually talked to these people. And so I just look at what they tell the court because they have to tell the court under oath. And so I think it's better than just if they're just talking to Rob Warren. Mm-hmm. So you look at what's called the defense sentencing memorandum. Mm-hmm. And that's when the defense gives their side of the story in the name of the defendant. Mm-hmm. So father said he's at a parish, a lot of pressure. He's the only one there. And there's baptisms. There's all this stuff going on. He's overworked, basically. And he comes home and he's at an empty rectory, right? He's alone. And that's when he slipped into gambling. Now, especially when you go to casino, it's about you, right? When you're baptizing, when you're celebrating mass, it's never about you, right? You're doing these sick calls. It's never about you. You're hearing confession. It's not about you. When you go to the casino, you sit down, they give you a drink, you play. It's about you. And so he gambled by $650,000, pled guilty.
Do you know over how long?
I can't remember. It was a few years.
Okay.
A few years. I mean, he wasn't like a 20-year fraud, and you have him out there, but it's. And then I think he got 30 months or 33 months.
How'd they catch him?
I think it was an audit. I'd have to double check. I think it was an audit because he used parish funds.
Eventually, somebody at the diocese or a finance committee, starts saying, "Wait a second, where's?"
I think it was an audit. What happens is parishes are periodically audited. Okay, I think that's how they got him. I'd have to double check. And so he pleads guilty, goes to federal prison, takes his medicine, gets out, transfers to an Eastern Rite diocese, and is now a high-ranking official in Eastern Rite diocese.
Are you serious? What do you think about that? Is that okay? Did they do his time and he gets a second chance, or is it like, no, this is like a CEO embezzling. You're never going to be a CEO again. You got to go do something else. Yeah,
well, there are two ways to think about it. I tend to be a little harsher on it. Maybe I shouldn't, but if he has a vocation to be a priest, he still has a vocation. If they can somehow rehabilitate him and give him a job that doesn't require access to money and under supervision, then you can make that argument. So, for example, the priest in the Midwest that I talked about before, he was given weekend assignments, and they eventually brought him back where he's an assistant pastor. He has no access to the money, and everybody knows what he did. Now, he doesn't have the Scarlet S or whatever, or the Scarlet A or whatever you want to say for Scarlet,
right.
G for gambler.
Right.
But people know. And you really can't trust him with money really for his own good. Mm-hmm. Now, in this case, he transfers to an Eastern Rite diocese. Great. If they need help and the mass is said and confessions heard, great. But to give him, he's on the personnel committee. That is not the kind of person with a demonstrated history that you want making decisions. You can make him an assistant pastor somewhere under supervision. Maybe you could join a cloistered religious order. Mm-hmm. I joke, and it's just a joke. You can edit this out if you like. That you can start your own religious order, like the Order of St. Matthew, since he was a tax collector and accountant.
Okay, that's good.
Or maybe like Opus Dei.
Opus Dei. Okay, good. You got to be Catholic and appreciate the corny humor. Yeah.
And so there's some structure there. Sending somebody to another diocese to give them another position of authority like that. Mm-hmm. Because number one, I think that's dicey. Number one, each diocese is insured against theft. So if you steal from McDonald's and you're a cashier, the last thing you're ever going to be is a cashier again, anywhere, because you're not insurable. So when the insurance carrier looks at this person who stole $650,000, how do you insure against theft for that person? Because a lot of reasons the diocese turns in the priest to authorities is they want to file an insurance claim against theft.
That's right. So if you have any knowledge that there could be a pending lawsuit, there's not a lawsuit, but it could just be pending, and you don't notify your insurance, company, you're forfeiting the right for a recovery under your insurance. Correct. So I could see they do this. They report it simply to make sure that they get refunded.
Mm-hmm. So, and insurance companies, they want a police report, and so because they want to know you're taking steps to mitigate. Mm-hmm. I would love to have been in that conversation with their insurance carrier. And if there's might be things I don't know that they know, I think it's dicey. But about a quarter of the priests are returned to ministry.
That's what the results of your study show, that a quarter of the priests.
About a quarter of priests.
After what? After being convicted of something?
Either convicted or even accused, a credible accusation. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the term of art. Right. So in other words, my term is handled civilly or internally. So, for example, there was a priest out in Archdiocese of Portland, and he was investigated by the state. The allegation was he was misusing parish funds, and that he employed a woman who said she was a nun but was his ex-fiancée. And they had a company together that trained women to be child care providers, if I remember correctly. That's what it was. So the allegation was they took trips for this business or took trips for non-church reasons. So allegation was made. The bishop gets involved. He suspends the priest. The priest lawyers up and doesn't talk. His nun, the state never really figured out whether she was a nun or not. She went back to Mexico, where she was from.
Oh, that's why it would be a little hard.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she's outside the jurisdiction,
okay.
And he's lawyered up. So I guess the priest and the bishop come to an agreement, and the state. I have the state's 6-page report because they did a summary of it. And I FOIA'd it, and they gave it to me. And they say basically, look, we don't know what's going on here, but he says these are valid expenses. The bishop says not. There's room to believe some are, some aren't. This woman can't be interviewed, so and the records aren't very good. So the bishop, they come to an agreement on a repayment schedule for some of the expenses, and he's returned to ministry as a pastor.
Wow.
With no real explanation.
Wow.
And you might say, well, maybe he got ordained when he was young. He didn't have any training or whatever. He was a late vocation and had a career as a business person.
Yeah.
So he knew.
Yeah.
And he knew enough to lawyer up, which is his right. And that doesn't mean he's guilty of anything. But now he's back still as a pastor.
Wow.
There was a case in Chicago of a pastor who stole money, and it was really kind of an interesting story. The parishioners thought he was stealing, and one of the parishioners was a Chicago detective. So he put bait money in the collection plate, $20 bill.
Oh, God.
That was marked. And
like
you see this a couple times.
It's like a TV show, man.
And guess what? The $20 bill's not there. And they figure out Father has it. So then the Chicago PD started investigating Father. And there's a rash of 4 cases in Chicago during the time. And so Father pleads guilty. And then he's on, I don't want to say on ice, but he's not laicized. But he's suspended for about 6 or 7 years. There's a change in the chancery. New Archbishop comes in. He's brought back as a assistant pastor, or actually as an administrator, and then works about another 10 years as a pastor before he retires. Now he's at a parish.
Well, as an administrator, you got all the financial responsibilities that a pastor does.
Right.
So it's going to be.
And he got probation, I think. But again, he didn't really come. He pled guilty. Yeah, he was on ice 6 or 7 years. But I could never find a good explanation of why he was returned to ministry. He just, Father, you see breaking service for 8 years.
Right.
And that's about as far as I'll go in that case. I got some more to say, but I'm not going to say in that case.
All right. What about the Candy Crush guy? I'm sorry. I shouldn't laugh. I shouldn't laugh at this, but it's laughable. I don't know what else to say. Candy Crush?
Yeah. Father, the case is ongoing. It appears he's going to trial next month. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to get that on the air. Nobody's getting sued.
Innocent until proven guilty.
Right. So Father...
well, given how...
Am I allowed to use the name since it's... maybe it's not ongoing. You can always beep it out.
Yeah.
Okay. He is a pastor at Parish. I think in 2016, he gets hit by a car, incurs a brain injury, and loses half of one leg. And it's horrible. During his recovery, he gets addicted to these online video games like Candy Crush. It was a big game they talked about.
Which is not like gambling.
He wasn't gambling. He wasn't on any websites you shouldn't have been on, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
He's not on any dating websites. He just gets addicted to video games.
Yeah.
And particularly Candy Crush.
I don't even know what that is. I hear about it, but I don't even know what Candy Crush is.
It's some sort of... I'm not on Candy. I used to play Candy Crush.
Let's play Candy Crush after this is over. I have no idea. I'll have to ask, like...
Must be a great game.
Apparently. Sorry, keep going.
So it's a free game, but you can... the higher the levels, the harder it is. You get to buy into different levels.
Okay.
All right. So he says he's playing it on his iPad. And by the way, he spent about a year and a half in recovery. He teaches at the seminary for a while, then eventually returned to the pastor. So he has an iPad, and somehow, and that's the part that's kind of nebulous, the parish credit card gets tied to the game. And he says he's not a quote-unquote detail guy. So he runs up a $40,000 bill buying these upgrades for a couple different video games. And I think it was only about a year and a half or 2 years.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of money.
Upgrading.
That's a lot of money. And then it's caught, I believe, during an audit. But it's in Philadelphia. So they had another case in Philadelphia that was had a lot of airplay about a priest who, they call him the grinder priest. He had a priest who stole $100,000 from his parish, allegedly, and spent it on online websites to meet guys.
Okay. To meet guys. Yeah. So you got a homosexual priest going online to meet guys.
And he would meet him at the beach where he had a house, right? So some of the money went to dates, I guess. Some of the money went to the house. The allegation is $100,000. Now, in the end, he's getting ready to go to trial. He works out a deal with the state, no jail time, and I think the loss is reduced to $7,000.
Wow.
But he does plead guilty.
Okay.
So that was a very well-known case in the Philadelphia area, near where this priest who played Candy Crush had a neighboring parish. Mm-hmm. And so the secretary is like, Father, you don't want to end up like Father so-and-so over there, because now it's a big deal. So eventually, I think I don't know if the diocese has an order, whether somebody dimes him out. I can't remember.
No, we're back on the Candy Crush.
Yeah, the Candy Crush priest, okay. Yeah. He's suspended from ministry.
Oh, here we are.
Oh, Candy Crush.
Sorry. I'm sorry. How do you get addicted to that? Poor guy.
Well, we're still looking at it. Maybe that's why. Go left.
Okay. Thanks, Kev. All right. Sorry. So his secretary says you don't want to end up.
You don't want to like follow
the other
so-and-so.
guy. Okay.
So he's eventually suspended from ministry. I cannot remember how he got caught, but it's in the court documents. I just know this by the court documents. He's suspended. The bishop calls the local police, and father's mortified according to the court records. So he tries to start paying the money back. He detaches the card from his computer, gets rid of the iPad. Oh, he also bought, allegedly, like gifts for his goddaughter, like a backpack for school or something with the credit card. Not that nobody's really going to get, but if he was a friar and he goes to the head guys, hey, my goddaughter has a birthday, I'm going to go buy her backpack. The friar could say, okay, here's money for that. So there's it's a little, yeah, if you're going to be a priest, you may want to consider vowing poverty because you probably end up better in the end.
Yeah.
So getting back to Father, he goes into the police. He come on in for an interview. He goes in for an interview, and he talks to them without an attorney, which is never a good thing.
Mm-hmm. When
I was an agent, I loved it. Oh, we don't need an attorney. But now on the other side, you want an attorney. He's probably a pretty honest guy. He goes in, he tells his side of the story, thinking everything's going to be fine. Then he gets indicted.
Mm-hmm.
So now he's under indictment. He has a lawyer, and I think trial is scheduled for next month or April.
Wow. So
it's going to trial. If I get a chance, I might want to go up and actually. I've never actually seen one of these trials. I've seen plenty of trials. I've never seen a priest fraud trial.
So did he plead guilty or not guilty?
Oh, he pleaded not guilty.
Not guilty. That's why there's a trial.
He's going to trial. It's a pending case. Everybody's innocent until proven guilty.
Right. So it's interesting. So the records are there that he must be claiming that it was an accident or something,
or that he had some sort of brain damage.
Yeah,
right, from the accident, maybe some sort of residual from the accident.
Yeah.
So are you going to be able to find 12 jurors? So he's missing part of one leg, and has brain damage. Now he's going to walk in.
If I was a defense attorney, I'd say it's a good case. I could maybe win that.
All you got to do is reasonable doubt with one person.
Yeah.
Can you find 12 people with everything going on in the church to say, well, okay, did he have the mens rea? Did he have the cognitive ability to say, I'm going to steal from the parish?
Yeah.
But in the end, if he pleaded guilty, he wouldn't get any jail time. There's no way he's going to get any jail time. He'd get probation.
Why?
Because
it's $40,000. Just
it's only
enough.
$40,000.
Yeah.
It's only $40,000.
Right.
There was a case I talked to my students about yesterday of somebody who stole I think it was 1.3 million from a business and got a year and a day in jail. In my auditing class, we talk about internal controls.
Yeah.
So $40,000, no, he's not going to jail.
Now, on this money part, one of the interesting things from your study that I gleaned is the average scheme lasted 6.1 years with an average loss of $469,000. So, again, just to give people a framework here, I think you said there was 95 cases that your study included. Is that right?
Yeah, but that articles, I wrote it back in 2022 or 2021.
Okay. So there's been some more.
Yeah.
But I bet the averages probably still hold, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So the schemes usually last 6 years and almost $470,000. That to me, Rob, sounds like a really high average. I mean, priests getting their hands on $470,000 over 6 years, they're tonning it away. I mean, if they were getting $5 or $10,000 a year, I could see how that could go missing from a $2 million church budget.
Right.
But they're getting hefty percentages of the parish total income for the year. I mean, I know the church budgets. I mean, they're rather small, and so to be putting away almost $100,000 a year in some kind of scheme, they're dumb. Don't they know they're going to get caught?
Well,
that's a huge number, dude.
Yeah, well, every once in a while you find what I call a kamikaze fraud. So
that's easy to envision. Yeah,
you know they're going to get caught.
Yeah.
So there was a lay person. Now I'm starting to really focus more on lay people. Now their their pressures are different. Okay, so there was a case. I think it was Florida or Alabama, but I believe it was Florida. Look, you got a lot of wealthy parishes in Florida, right? A lot of older people go down there. They're generous to the church. Thank God they're there. Thank God they're generous. So the parish is building, I believe, an additional building and paving the parking lot. So the longtime parish accountant steals about $800,000 in the course of about 6-7 months.
Goodness gracious.
And I think one of the things she does is build a pickle court at her house, which kind of odd to me.
Nice pickle court.
Yeah. I mean, she did other things, paid off her mortgage, bought a boat.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what happened, the way she did it was she had access to the system. The bill comes in, put it in the system, the accounting records spits out a check. Take the check to Father. Here's the invoice for the paving, whatever they're doing. Father, okay, fine. Father signs. She takes the check. She rips it up. And then she writes she has the paper checkbook. She writes a paper check to herself. And so on the accounting records, it's, Joe Bo paving, for whatever the amount. And then what happens is you see a check going through the bank account, different number, but for the same amount.
Right.
Okay. So it takes a few months. But, Joe Bo Plaving calls up and says, where's my check? Well, we sent it. And you got my check. So finally the pastor gets involved and they complain to the pastor. Now, if you're not paying the contractor, they're going to come back to you. They're going to
come back to you, yeah.
So why do it?
Yeah.
And she got sentenced. I think she got some time, not much. What she said the pressure was, she had a child with some health issues. The husband was a firefighter who spent a lot of time away. They kind of danced around that, but she had to know she was going to get caught. She had to.
Do you think that the court system or jurors are easier or harder on priests, religious nuns than lay people?
It's harder because very few cases go to trial. And number one, and then second is the judge is the one who sentences.
Right.
So if you go to trial and lose, the judge is going to sentence you harsher than if you pleaded guilty.
Sure, absolutely.
Especially in the federal system because you get points for acceptance.
Yeah, I was a federal law clerk for 2 years, so this is mostly what we did is sentencing after people would plea.
Yeah, most people plea.
Or but you still got a sentencing.
But if you want to go to trial and you're gonna and you lose, you're gonna have to pay now.
Yeah.
That's how it works. I do think that priests get a break. I think there's basically a clergy privilege.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, there has to, like, I think there's a clergy privilege.
Because you see these people have not done a lot of time compared to...
They have not done time.
If they had been lay people, would the prosecutors have been easier? Would they have been, or harder? Right. Would judges have been harder?
Right.
You know.
Let me give you a case. There was a case in North Carolina. University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, there's a parish there, but it's also the student center, right? It doubles as both. So a parish administrator there steals, I think it was $300,000. I have to look back on my stuff. I think it was anywhere between $300,000 and $500,000. So I had to bet a Catholic U with a professor that this guy's not going to get time. And the professor says, no, Rob, he's going to get 5 years. No, I know. I talked to the pastor. It was a conventual parish, conventual Franciscan parish. Old conventual, didn't know much about money, let the guy run everything. New conventual pastor comes in and says, I want the passwords, I want access to everything. And once he got administrative access to everything and all the records, he's like, there's money missing here. So one of the things the lay administrator had done is taken his girlfriend to Las Vegas. Before they got married. I'm sure it was separate hotel rooms. And maybe they saw Celine Dion. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe they ran into that priest of the other parish. Okay. But I said, no, there's no way this guy's going to jail for that amount of money because these priests aren't going to jail for that amount of money. And he got 5 years.
Wow.
For that.
Wow.
And
for how much money again was it?
It was anywhere between $300,000 and $500,000. I'd have to take a look.
And so if it was a priest, it would not have.
No, I've seen priests get off $300,000-$400,000, no jail.
What do you think that is? I mean, you would think that the civil authorities would be hostile towards priests, right? I mean, and is it any idea if it's the same for Protestant ministers?
I don't know. I have not studied Protestant ministers. That's a good question. Look, I think there's a couple things. Number one, when priests plead guilty, if they were, you've got to remember, a priest is a person you see at your happiest and lowest moments of your life. Mm-hmm. You get married, there's a priest witnessing. It could be a deacon, but there's usually a priest witnessing your marriage. They're baptizing your child. They're coming out in the middle of the night to make sure, grandma has last rites. Your kid gets in a car accident, they're there to pray with you. That generates a lot of loyalty. Okay. And they're forgiving your sins. They're not giving you a hard time to go to confession. Hopefully they give you some good advice, but they're forgiving you. So now you get to forgive him. I think that's part of it. And so, I mean, there's the Stockholm Syndrome was one of the things. I remember Patty Hearst. I mean, they have loyalty. Patty Hearst was kidnapped by the Simony Liberation Army. Oh. And next thing you know, she's a Simony Liberation fighter. She bought into what her captors were doing. She'll rob a bank. Yeah. Well, it's almost like a Patty Hearst syndrome going on.
Well, yeah, you also said Stockholm Syndrome, which is kind of famous for, why don't you explain kind of what that is?
Basically, the theory is that you're kidnapped and you start identifying with the captors and what they're doing is okay.
Right.
Okay. So what happens here is you get a priest it's happening in Michigan. A priest was at a parish and a $428,000 check comes in for the parish. So Mrs. So-and-so died, leaves money to the parish. His rationalization is he thought the check was for him personally. The problem is it's in the name of the parish. Okay? But it's for him personally. That's the rationalization. And he's getting ready to buy a condo in Florida from the parish secretary selling her condo in Florida. Oh. So he goes to a bank, opens up a name in the account of the parish, care of Father so-and-so, cashes a check, and that becomes the payment for the condo from the parish secretary. Okay. And and that's what he pleads guilty to. There's other allegations, according to the indictment, that he did things like take the Mother's Day money out of the flower fund, take money out of the poor box. Yeah, there was most parishes. If you have high steeples, they have a cell phone tower. He was taking a cell phone check. Now,
interesting.
Now, part of it, but this goes specifically back to that money. He's like, oh, I thought it was meant for me. In fact, I talked to his defense attorney. I said, well, did the family or did the estate take it as a charitable deduction? Because you can only do that for
to give
licensed charities.
To a nonprofit.
He goes, well, there might have been. I'm not sure. No, he knew. He's a fence trader. He's not going to tell me, and I certainly understand that.
And somebody that has enough money to give $400,000, they know how to get tax deductions, and they know if they give it to a person, it's a gift.
Exactly.
It's a gift, not a donation.
Okay, so the priest eventually pleads guilty and gets 29 months in the federal pen.
Really?
Now, he pleads to that check, but there's other things involved. And the secretary had to take a plea, too, to something. Okay, but back to father.
For accepting the money because she knew what it was?
Yeah, that's part of it. She engaged in the scheme. What she pleaded guilty to was she was divorced, but she still wanted her ex-husband to get health insurance. And so father signed off on the form that said they were married.
Oh, gosh.
When he knew they were legally divorced. He says, well, in the eyes of the church, they're still married.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, but in the eyes of Caesar, they're not.
Yeah, what a ripple. Yeah.
And what I suspect happened based on, if you read the court documents, he was going to go to trial and all of a sudden he pleads guilty. But she got to plead to the misdemeanor. So I think what happened was they said, look, you plead guilty, we'll let her plead to the misdemeanor. But if you want to go to trial, we're going to rock and roll on both of you.
Wow.
And we'll see what happens. And both are going to jail. We'll have a good old conspiracy.
Yeah.
So she gets to share in your sentence.
Yeah. Yes, she does.
And so my thought is he pleaded guilty to spare
kind of
her.
protect her a little bit.
Yeah, protect her. But I mean, he did the crime. And now, but okay, getting back to your original question, for that priest, they set up a website, justice for Father so-and-so. And so these parishioners are showing up at the sentencing for Father so-and-so. They're sending letters to the judge. And that sways the judge, I believe. Plus, at least in federal sentencing, judges can take into account somebody's reputation in the community and all their good deeds. So let's say you're the Little League baseball coach for 30 years, and you commit a crime, DWI, let's say. They can take into account the fact that you're the Little League baseball coach for 30 years in the federal system. But the problem is that's what priests are supposed to do. That's their job.
Yeah.
Their job is to do these good things.
It's sort of like saying that, well, he was a firefighter and he put out fires so we shouldn't convict him of his crime because he was a great community servant. It's like, but that was his job.
Right. And great, okay, you convicted the crime, but now what's the punishment? Okay. So if the punishment is supposed to reflect maybe somebody standing in the community, we're going to give him a break. They won the Medal of Honor. So we're going to give him a break. Yeah, but he was supposed to do the baptisms and the wedding. Because I've read these letters from parishioners. It's all about he came out in the middle of the night when my kid was sick and gave last rites. I mean, all that sort of stuff. Now, it's great they did it.
It's great.
That's their job.
That's his job.
Okay. And then so you got parishioners who start websites.
He's a great priest. He baptized my child. It's like, well, he did. Of course he did.
Yes. He came out. They do some really extraordinary stuff. They came out to the car accident.
No doubt.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then what happens, and I was surprised, is you have bishops asking for leniency.
Yeah.
That, because if I can give you a case, close home, the only case I have in the Diocese of Arlington, which is where I live. And in fact, on Saturdays, I go to this parish. And I see the photo of the priest in the line of pastors. And it kind of calls me, but look, my wife likes going there. It's Saturday morning. My wife says, just all the stuff she's had to put up with over all the years.
Just avert your eyes.
Just avert your eyes.
Okay.
Ladau who was sinless, cast first stone.
Hey, think about what pastors or priests have to go through after hearing all of our confessions.
Yeah, it's true.
They have to look at us, and they know terrible things. So
I agree. So in your issue of how they get off leniency, okay, so there's a priest in the Diocese of Arlington, and this goes into the bishops. A priest in the Diocese of Arlington is back in 2000. He's dead. And he has no heirs. Steals $1 million from 2 or 3 parishes, including the one he started, and including the one I go to on Saturday mornings. He does things like buys a townhouse and invests in a company that makes high interest loans to poor people. Okay, so he gets caught, and I think it was a diocesan audit because now he's at his 3rd parish, and now everything's catching up. Because a lot of times what happens is the pastor leaves, the new pastor comes in. Generally the best practice is when a pastor changes, you bring in auditors because you want everybody to start clean. Sure. And so
that's actually a good practice. Is that
it's excellent practice?
Is that done?
Yes.
Okay.
I can tell in the Diocese of Arlington that's what they do. You're on a 3-year cycle, or when the priest changes, is my understanding.
So you should have it at least every 3 years.
Yeah, but if you're not doing an audit, at least when the pastor changes, you got a problem.
Yeah.
So then what happens is he pleads guilty, and pays back $1 million. Father's got $1 million lying around.
How do you get that money laying around?
I don't know. It's good. I never figured that out. Now, maybe he sold the condo. I don't know.
You want more coffee?
Oh, no, I'm fine. Thank you. So then what happens is the bishop of the time, Bishop Laverty, sends a letter to the court. Please don't send Father to jail. The loss, he's been suspended from ministry. The loss of his priesthood is punishment enough.
Punishment enough, yeah.
So Father's so distraught, he has to retire to Florida with his pension. And then he's so distraught, he has to ask the court to go to Italy on vacation to visit relatives in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he dies of a heart attack in Italy. He had been a Capuchin to begin his career, then to begin his ministry, and then he got incarnated in the Diocese of Arlington. So I wrote a letter to the Diocese of Arlington asking, well, how did Bishop Laverty know that the loss of his priesthood was enough? Never got I got a response saying, thank you very much. And that's about it.
So these are usually embezzling case. These are all, are they all classified as embezzlement?
They plead to different things. Some is wire fraud.
Okay.
It's really all embezzlement. Every once in a while, you'll see a priest there was one guy in Rhode Island who was leaving the priesthood. And so we took like a couch or something, so some furniture for the parish. But basically, it's money.
So I think what a lot of people would be wondering is, we haven't really talked much. I mean, you've kind of brushed up against some of it, but where are there sexual scandals in all of this? Because we've talked about a lot of gambling and everything. But sometimes, I don't know if it's the majority of the cases, the minority of the cases, they're taking money to support their completely inappropriate sexual lifestyle. Now, what's your experience with that?
I think overall you look at there's more gambling cases than cases where there's an illicit relationship.
I'm glad to hear that, actually.
Yeah. So look, if there was an illicit relationship, majority of the time it was going to be with a male and a female. But if I look back on my study, I think there was 8 cases that it was solely because of relationship. And then I think out of, say, 100, you're going to get probably 20 where there is a illicit relationship.
And is that what are they embezzling the money for? To go on vacations with this person, or
buy real estate
to pay them off?
No. Well, there's a couple. You go on vacation, buy real estate, help pay for their college education. The priest up in Connecticut who ended up, stealing $1 million, fleeing to New York City.
Okay.
One of the things he did was pay for a young man with whom he was having a relationship, pay for him to go to college.
Oh, okay.
And to pay for his vet bills for the dog.
Is that like shut up money?
No. They were in. They would call a relationship. Wasn't a shut up. There was a priest in Delaware who was allegedly, well, he pleaded guilty to stealing, but the alleged motive was, before he was ordained, he had been involved in a relationship with a man, and years later was getting blackmailed. And so the allegation, which he didn't plead to it, but that was in the indictment. He pleaded to stealing, but he didn't plead to this. The allegation was he was being blackmailed by that person with whom he had a relationship several decades ago, before he was ordained. And that was his, he was being blackmailed, to keep quiet.
Right.
That you get a few cases like that. Look, but then you get some cases like there was a priest in Massachusetts who somehow in his priest salary bought a 5-acre farm with a 7-car garage in like Martha's Vineyard or something. Or it was a 7-acre property with a 5-car garage. Can't remember, one of the two. Okay. And the reason he was caught was a person with whom he had a male with whom he had a close relationship was being investigated for murder. And somehow they figured, and then the cops are investigating that person, and then they figure out that, well, father's got a 5-acre house. How did you do that on a salary? And then so father was investigated, and he pleaded guilty to state income tax fraud. And he had to admit that basically he was taking money because he wanted this 5-acre property with a 7-car garage, and he had to put cars in the garage because it's 7 cars in the garage, and he needed a golf cart to go around his 5 acres because he had some hip problems. So of course the parish had to pay for that.
Tan Books is here to help you become a saint. That's why we do everything we do. We publish thousands of titles, literally, that are specifically written to help you get to heaven. Everything from the lives of the saints to the writings of the saints, the greatest doctors of the church, the great spiritual masters, Alphonsus Liguori, St. Francis de Sales, and so on. So please come to tanbooks.com and find the book that God wants you to have right now so that you can get to heaven and be a saint for eternity.
You sent me an article. I think it's an active situation. I don't even know if there has been an indictment yet. I think there was an indictment about I think another priest up in
Hartford.
Yes, and I think the moral of that story is how the parishioners just flocked to this guy's defense, and it was in national news. Mm-hmm. So tell that story a little bit, because the purpose is to show this situation where the parishioners, and we're not saying this man's guilty, he has not been convicted.
Sure.
But the moral of the story is these parishioners will come out of the woodworks to defend their pastor because they just cannot believe the accusation.
Sure. Yeah, there was a priest up in the Archdiocese of Hartford. It's an ongoing case. He has not been indicted. The police have not confirmed that it's even been referred.
Okay, so it hadn't even been indicted.
Right.
Okay.
So what the diocese put out, and they read this, the diocese had a statement read from the pulpit.
They did, yeah.
And it says a longtime 20-year pastor, which might be part of the problem, has been removed from ministry because he has admitted to the bishop that he has used money inappropriately. According to news reports, one of the things he's done is gone to Indian casinos, but then his lawyer says
back to gambling.
But then his lawyer, the priest lawyer, says, well, he was gambling with his own money. I'm not sure what money he's talking about because they don't make that much. He's at
Do we know how much is involved? Hasn't been released yet.
Right, hasn't been released. And
it would be in federal court documents if there's an indictment and if there's a okay.
Even a state court document, they're gonna give you a number.
Okay.
Look, he's at a lower income parish in Hartford, and he's sort of the celebrity pastor. Mm-hmm. He's known to be good for the poor. What the diocese says. He's
also known for encouraging people to bring their pets to mass.
Yeah.
To mass.
Yeah.
Bring your pets to mass, kids. Okay.
I presume it's dogs and cats, not your boa constrictor or whatever. But
amazing.
I used to go to a country parish where the priest's dog would come in and out and sit by the St. Joseph statue. Nobody else could bring their pet, but Father's pet could be there.
Okay.
But and he did half the mass in Latin because he was he was ordained before Vatican II. Wonderful guy.
All right, so that's strange. You got the Latin traditional guy letting a dog in the church. Okay.
Yeah, but it's country. Okay. I don't know. I'm just not. I'm not a big pet owner. I don't know. It's odd. It's odd, especially to inner city.
So this pet priest is beloved by his
beloved.
Yeah.
Beloved. So he's giving money to the poor. But the problem is, and he admits this, parish funds ended up in his own bank account. Mm-hmm. No, you can't do that. You cannot do that. You got to have separation of accounts. The only parish money that should be going into the priest's bank account is his salary or expense reimbursements. Now, my presumption is he's taking cash from the collection. Now, if he's taking cash from the collection before it's counted, then the diocese is getting gypped because they take a cut of the weekly collection. So the bishop's not going to be happy about that.
Kevin, I'm going to send you this real quick here, this article. Maybe you can just throw the article up on the screen. But here it is. The only purpose in me sending this is to show how much the people come flocking to his defense. There, I just texted it to you. So in a minute, you might be able to pull that up and we'll come back to that.
So while the replacement priest or the chancellor of the diocese or vicar of a clergy or whatever is reading the statement from the bishop, father's been suspended, a young man gets up and defends the priest from the pulpit, so to speak.
Yeah, that's the picture I was going to show.
And I think that's very disrespectful.
Yeah.
And then there's a parish protest.
Yeah.
Free father,
whoever,
whatever. Yeah. Okay. Couple things here. They talked. The young priest, the young man talked about whether they're going to take father's pension. They're not going to take father's pension. Father's 73 years old. He can retire. He's going to get a pension, health care, room and board to the day he dies. Mm-hmm. Nobody's taking away any benefits. Number one. That's the first thing you got to remember. Number two, he can get a canon lawyer. He can get a civil lawyer. He has all his rights. And on top of that, the diocese is still paying his salary and making sure he's cared for.
Do you think that if you hire a canon lawyer to represent you in this, that the diocese pays for your canon lawyer, or you got to do it yourself?
I don't know.
Interesting.
Well, first of all, until you're charged, you got to pay for your own lawyer.
Okay. For your own civil lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I am sure it's all those years of being a priest, he's got to know a couple lawyers that will help him out.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot imagine it. Or he can go to legal aid. If somebody will help him.
Oh, sure. No doubt. No doubt.
Okay. Now, going back to the issue of the parishioners. So they have a protest. They got signs.
Here. This is, I found this interesting because the pictures paint 1,000 words,
Yeah.
right? So here, outside of this church, they have a huge protest talking about freedom. Bring back Father Jacobs, Father Jacobs, something God's work, and then scroll down a little, Kevin.
I don't see any dogs.
It's somewhere.
Okay. But I don't see any dogs in the photo.
No, I don't either. But here, Kevin, up, right there. This was the picture you're talking about.
Yeah.
So this is a diocesan representative priest reading the statement,
yeah.
probably after a mass,
Yes.
which is sometimes when they have to deliver really hard news to a parish. That's how they do it. That happened in our diocese recently, where they just had to send in somebody to read a statement for people after mass was over. And this young man storms the altar, takes over the podium here, and starts railing against the diocese, saying Father would have never done that. He loved us, and he just goes off. And so you can kind of read some of his statement, which is highly disrespectful, but it just shows like how these people just think it's impossible that he did this. Now, maybe the court will find he didn't do anything.
Sure.
I mean, again, innocent until proven guilty, and he hadn't even been indicted, but the diocese clearly thinks there was something bad enough to where they had to remove him. But it goes back to the question of how do we allow priests to get into this situation? That's a good point right now. Kevin, you can make that go away, but I just thought that was an interest. Just the picture says it all.
Yeah.
So, there's some other stories I want to get to. I want to talk about the McCarrick story we were talking about.
Sure.
And the Weakling, Rembert.
Remember Weakland?
Yeah.
Oh, can we talk a little about the parish a little more, if you don't mind?
Yes, please. No, go. I was just trying to. Eventually, we just need to get to what do we do about it?
We do about it. Lots we can do about it. There's a lot of hope.
Right, and so we'll get to that. We're still kind of in story mode, but go ahead.
But you have, whether it's the priest in Detroit I was talking about or another priest in Florida, you have parishioners who get together and they start websites. And they write the bishop. And the bishop's representatives come out. And they have protests. They want their guy back. Or they want their beloved priest back. It's not their priest. He's there, and the bishop has a right to, under canon law, to remove him under certain circumstances, and the bishop has to be prudent. And the bishop doesn't want, most bishops, I presume, that they don't want these problems, right? There's fewer priests. They want everybody active and productive and happy. So the bishop has no, dog in the fight, so to speak, to remove a priest who's doing his job. And even if the priest is removed, he still has all sorts of rights. So I think that if you're in that situation, you're at a parish, just calm down. Right? And what I noticed is that in the two parishes where they started websites, free Father so-and-so. Father so-and-so never responds on the websites. Like, whatever happened to Father so-and-so? Nobody knows. But at the priest that stole the $450,000 for the condo, at his 50th anniversary for his ordination, he's in there with all the other priests in his garb, in the robes, and the parish and the diocesan newspaper. Father so-and-so celebrates 50 years as a priest. No mention that he stole from the parish and went to jail.
Yeah.
Now, I think there's got to be a balance.
Yeah.
But if you're a parishioner, your priest is going to be fine. And you don't want to put your bishops back against the wall.
Yeah.
Because whatever happened with that priest, he can be back in the pulpit very soon. Mm-hmm. I've seen it before.
Yeah.
I yield. Go ahead.
No. It's fantastic. What about you sent me a fascinating article that goes all the way back to the McCarrick days, and fascinating story about a certain Father John Mattingly.
Father John Mattingly, yeah.
And he made, I remember that name back from, when all this was going on. That was big time national news, if I recall. Some of these other things they go under the radar, but this was a big one. So tell us about that.
Okay, it's a heartbreaking story. Heartbreaking,
for sure.
Father John Mattingly, Southern Maryland guy, born and raised, came of age in the 1950s and is taken under his wing by a priest who then has inappropriate things with him. I'm not going to get into what he does.
But sexually abuses them.
Sexually abuses. Okay, I don't know if I can say that.
As a young boy.
As a young boy, 7 or 8 years old.
Awful.
Father Mattingly still goes on to be a priest, ordained, I think, in the 1969, 1970 range. Has a long career. In 1984, goes into therapy for the, and again, no priest was convicted of the abuse, but Father Mattingly put all this into a court document, filed under oath with the court, and the government did not dispute it. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to accept it as fact.
Okay.
So Father Mattingly has, in 84, starts going to therapy at a secular institution. He's in therapy for about 20 years. And during that time, he's developed a lot of health problems. He's got scoliosis. He's got diabetes. He's got hypertension. You name it. Depression. You name it, he's got it. So, but he's put out a pastor in the same church he grew up in Southern Maryland. And then the bishop comes to his, I think it was to do a confirmation. The bishop comes out, the Archbishop comes out, and he finally gets the nerve to tell the Archbishop what happened to him.
This is McCarrick.
So
before he's a cardinal.
Right, 2004.
So this would have been Archbishop
McCarrick. And I'm not sure when he became a cardinal. Maybe he might have been a cardinal. I think he came to D.C. in 2001 or so.
Okay.
So I'm not sure when he got the red hat.
May or may not have been a cardinal.
May not, but he's still the Archbishop of Washington. He goes, and Father Mattingly finally tells him that he was abused as a child and that he wanted to some money to set up a fund to help other abused children. Mm-hmm. So according to court records, McCarrick got mad, told him to never mention the name of the priest again and not mention the matter again, and storms out. That's what's in the official court record. So Father Mattingly he's mad.
Yeah.
So he decides to take matters into his own hands and get the money that he thinks he deserves or that he wants to pass along to other abused people. So he steals about $400,000. Go ahead.
Not the money that he deserves in his mind, the money that he deserves to give to other people.
Correct. The money that he wants to use to help others.
He wants to give to other people, not that he's not looking for restitution.
He's not looking for restitution. That's right. So at the time, he's also spending part of his salary to help pay for the mental health care of several other young people who were abused, according to the court record. So he's spending his own funds to help other people who are kind of in a similar circumstance. So McCarrick's not going to be any help and forbids him to mention the name or mention the matter.
Which must have been salt in the wound because he's saying the church probably protected this abuser that hurt me, right. And now I'm trying to help innocent victims. And the corruption here manifested, personified in McCarrick, which we later on is proven that he was one of the most guilty of all.
Sure.
Slaps it down and orders him to not even mention this again, which is a completely inappropriate thing for him to have done to this priest. So the guy's really pissed off, which I kind of get it, and so he takes matters into his own hands and keep going.
He embezzled about $400,000 from his parish, and just takes the checks out of the collection. Not very sophisticated. Writes the name of the check, puts in like his 401k plan, that sort of stuff. He's finally caught out. He retires early because of medical problems. And again, this is somebody who has significant health problems and is on lots of medication for depression, pain, and in any other profession, he would have been on Social Security disability and retired. But he's at a parish alone with all that responsibility. Mm-hmm. Okay. So he retires in 2010. And what happens? A new pastor comes in. Well, all of a sudden the collection goes up. And people wondering where their contribution statements are wrong, that sort of thing. So the diocese and Father Mattingly try to work out an agreement. Somehow they don't come to an agreement on what to repay. Father Mattingly feels kind of strong-armed, and so finally the diocese refers it to the state prosecutor. The problem is so many members of the prosecutor's office go to that parish, so they refer it to the feds. So now it's literally a federal case. So they go out and they arrest Father Mattingly, and now he spends a day in jail. They release him. And so he works out a plea where he gets time served one day, and he gets some probation. He doesn't show up for probation. He's on an ankle bracelet, right? Home monitoring. He doesn't show up for these. So then the probation officer, we might go. It turns out he's in hospice now because he has cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So he's on probation. They take the bracelet off, or the ankle bracelet off, because he's in hospice, and he dies a few months after he gets sentenced.
Wow.
But he didn't spend any of the money.
That's the curious case. I think that's why you named this article the curious case. This was your article, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so Father Mattingly never spent the money.
Mm-hmm.
He said in his estate, it was supposed to be passed along to a charity to help people who are in those similar circumstances. That's what he wanted done. So when it was time to pay the money back, he just wrote it out of his bank account.
Mm-hmm. So he was going to set up like a trust account, and that it was clear that was his intent. He never actually did it.
Never actually did it.
And so this criminal is different in kind,
mm-hmm.
not just degree, but kind from many of the other situations
mm-hmm.
we've talked about.
Correct.
Now, but some people have, I think your article said that some people have compared him to Robin Hood, but it's a false analogy. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, it's a false analogy. Robin Hood, took from the rich and gave to the poor, right? So that's the story. Well, what Father Mattingly did was taken from his parishioners.
Yeah.
And maybe to give back to some other parishioners.
Right.
But it's not taken from the rich. That's not a rich parish. During the time he was suspended and to the time he died, he started worshiping at an Anglican church or Episcopal church.
Really?
Not as a clergy, but as a layperson.
Wow. So he basically left the church?
Left church, but I think he did get a Catholic funeral at his parish.
Speaking of...
by the way, I tracked down the alleged abuser, too, if you want to...
Really?
So that person was a member of a religious order. I'm not going to name the religious order. Took a couple years, but the religious order finally told me who the guy was.
Yeah.
And then it took me a couple years to get the sentencing document out of the court, by the way. But it took a while. It took a couple years, but we stood on it. And the alleged abuser, I'll call him alleged because he was never convicted, was a member of the religious order. He was laicized, left the order, was laicized, and then married and had, according to what I could track down, had children. And then he's dead now.
Wow. It's not every day that McCarrick comes up in a discussion here in this podcast studio. And so, he's perhaps represents more scandal in the church than any part. Did he die recently?
He's still alive.
He's still alive. Than any living churchman in America right now. Do you know anything about his the financial scandals and his whole situation, using payoff money to cover up the sexual abuse cases that he was involved in?
Very little. What I do know is that he would raise money. He was a prolific fundraiser.
Yeah.
And so in the Archdiocese of Washington, from my understanding, is that they had an account for him. So he'd raise money. He put in an account that was really his money to use, right? Supposedly for whatever charities he wants. The thing is, when you take that money and now you give it to the Archdiocese of Washington, now you're operating under the charitable umbrella of the Archdiocese of Washington. So they don't file a 990.
Right.
But and that now that's a tax deductible donation. What I think is interesting, you don't have real accounting of what he did with the money. I know he was giving money to people overseas. He was seeding whatever charities he thought was important. Don't know much about payoffs. It's an interesting subject. I have not gone through the McCarrick report. But I want to at some point.
If Pope Francis, of all people, if Pope Francis felt he had to remove him, have there been criminal prosecutions against McCarrick? I can't remember.
Yeah, there were. I think they charged him in Wisconsin and I think Jersey.
Why not jail time?
Well, the problem is he's unfit to stand trial.
Oh.
So I know about the Wisconsin case because I follow site.
Mentally or just physically?
Mentally and physically.
Okay. Does he have dementia?
Yeah. That according to court documents, Cardinal McCarrick is probably about 95 years old.
Yeah,
He's an older man.
Yeah, now
maybe 92. So that his mental capacity is diminished to the point where he cannot participate in his own defense.
Mm-hmm.
And he's physically diminished. He's using a walker. He's stooped over. It's hard to put somebody like that on trial.
Yeah.
And everybody's innocent until proven guilty.
Sure.
I'll put that in.
But so were there was not convictions?
No convictions.
Nothing really ever happened.
My understanding, there's no convictions.
Completely defrocked.
Yeah.
And he was laicized.
Right.
And there's quite a lot of debate about how much the Vatican covered what they knew about his dealings.
Again, I know very little about it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. So, but there's another cardinal or bishop, I can't remember.
Bransfield?
Weakling.
Cardinal Archbishop Weakland. Of Milwaukee,
Archbishop. Yeah. So you wanted to mention something on that. So that's an interesting situation. What's that all about? Because whenever that name comes up, it's usually involved to Vatican II and
Sure.
And I think he had like a doctorate in music, but he's put in charge of divine worship or something, and it just wreaked havoc on the church, and according to my circles. So, but how does this come into your area?
Okay, so I was in Milwaukee from 2001 to 2014 as basically I went out there as a supervisory special agent, then I stayed and went back to being an agent again. And so Rembert Weakland was the head abbot of the Benedictine order in Rome. I think it was in 77 or 78, becomes Archbishop of Milwaukee. And he's there till 2002 when he turns 75. Okay. It turns out that I think it was in 1980, there was a adult male with whom he had some sort of relationship with. Some may be considered inappropriate. I'm not even sure of the extent of the relationship, but it was the extent where the Archdiocese entered into a settlement with the young man. I think they paid him $450,000 in a basically a non-disclosure agreement. So in other words, you say the Archbishop did this, and we're willing to pay you this money in order to keep it quiet. Sign the paperwork.
Right.
Okay. Now the question is, in a lot of circles they say, well, Weakland stole the money. That's what you hear. Weakland stole the money. No, and it kind of. I don't want to defend Archbishop Weakland,
right,
but he did not steal the money.
Yeah.
So what happened? And so we had an IRS special agent who was, oh, there you go. When I was a supervisory special agent, an agent in my group was assigned to that case. And I actually sat in on a couple of the interviews. So I can tell you what's public. Because the prosecutor, Steve Biskupic, wonderful federal prosecutor, longtime federal prosecutor who became U.S. attorney, handled the investigation himself and gave a press conference, which was highly unusual. And what actually happened is a rich philanthropist donated a piece of property to the Archdiocese. That property was sold before the settlement and unconnected to the settlement. And the money was maintained in the diocese. And now money's fungible, right? There's no account number one with this money in it, but it's in the account. You look on the books and records, where's it from? It's from this sale of the land, which came from this philanthropist, and it's unrestricted money. You do whatever you want. So the gentleman threatens to sue. The lawyers get involved. The accountants get involved. There's nothing, nothing's hidden. Now they say, well, look, we have this money. Let's use that for the settlement, and that's what they did. Now, because it was under $500,000, from my understanding, you didn't have to go to the Vatican. The rule is back then, if you have an expense more than $500,000, you had to get Vatican approval. So they had to keep it under $500,000. So that is what is public. So the idea now, we get into internal controls. Now, if it's McDonald's making the settlement, nobody really cares. But one of the things with internal controls is, are you releasing enough information so the donors can make a valid decision on whether or not to give money to you? In other words, is this a piece of information shareholders or stakeholders are both entitled to and would make a difference in their view of the finances of the diocese?
Yeah.
It would. But it wasn't illegal. And that is what was in the public sphere. And so every once in a while, Milwaukee, somebody will you run across somebody, I was in Milwaukee. Oh, yeah, I remember Weakland. Yeah, he stole the money. He did not steal the money.
It's interesting.
It was imprudent to pay. I do think you should have told the Vatican. I definitely think you should have told the Vatican.
Right.
But it wasn't illegal, so it's not theft.
Right.
That's really kind of the point I wanted to make.
Let's shift the conversation to internal controls. We had some great stories. If any other stories come to mind, it's interesting to hear. But what does all this teach you about what the church needs to do to help these men? I mean, I think of, I'm at an age now to where I went to high school and college with priests that I know who are pastors of very substantial churches, and they don't take any business classes. They're not trained to be CEOs. That's not why they went into the ministry, and they end up having to operate like a businessman with a lot of financial issues. And yeah, people at the parish, kiss their butt because they're father. And so there's not always good controls. I do know that canon law requires every parish to have a finance council. I suspect this is why. But the purpose for internal controls is not that we don't trust our priests. It's that we have got to help them stay out of trouble and to help guide them. And this is the role of the laity. I mean, if Vatican II should have accomplished anything, it should be like a good way for laity to contribute. They don't need to be on dancing around the altar doing stupid stuff. But, there's smart men and women in your parish, Father. Get them to help you with these things. You know what I mean? And that's where finance committee comes in, or the what do you call it? Like your pastoral committee, or what do you call it when it's
parish council?
Parish council, yeah. So, but in terms of internal controls and at a very local level at a parish, what should be done so that we would avoid this? Because this $470,000, it takes 6 years to pull off on average. It should have never gotten to that point, and it's not caught until the priest leaves or an audit comes down from the diocese. Every one of these things should have been able to be stopped at the local level by the laity at the parish. It's their money. What do we do about this?
Well, this is what I'm really excited about, because there's so much that can be done. And for those of us who are excited about accounting, it's a great thing to talk about. So you have to remember, what is internal control? Internal control, it's the environment in which policies, procedures, and people come together to protect the assets of the business in order to further the goals of the organization. And really, there's 3 goals. There's operational goals, reporting goals, and regulatory goals. In other words, if you don't pay your taxes, they're going to shut you down. At TAN Books, I'm sure you want reports on how many books are sold.
Yep.
And operations for the parishes, we got to get baptisms, we got to get masses said, we got to sick calls, all that. And you do that, and you need money to do all that. So you have to design a set of internal controls that are going to safeguard the assets as they come in, the revenue coming in, the assets while they're there, and the assets going out, right? So you're getting money in, you protect it as it's coming in, you protect the money and the assets while it's there, and you make sure it's only being paid out for appropriate items. So there's a lot you can do. So the first thing you can do is, first of all, and it's a simple thing, is you got to have a code of ethics. People have to know what they're going to have to live up to. Very simple. Okay. And then the next thing is you have to have appropriate training. So that's very few things, very simple. So if you're a priest, we have to in seminaries teach accounting. Warren Buffett said, if you go to business school, the most important thing you can learn is accounting. They have to understand, not just have laity that can explain it to them. They have to be comfortable with that language themselves. Okay. Now, there are a couple ways to do it. You can either go to the community college and take it. That's fine. There are a couple programs out there that are very exciting that help priests become savvy on the business side. One's at Villanova. Villanova has a long church management program.
Yes.
Very well respected. And then Father Bob Gall was brought in from Rome to Catholic U at the Bush School of Business to continue a program that started under another person who left. Father Bob Gall is very knowledgeable in these things. And they teach you both the canon law and the civil law, and they go through the accounting portion. Rick Westerman, CPA out of Virginia, has done some exciting work in teaching priests basic accounting for Catholic International University. He spent 130 hours designing a program. Long time. He's converted to the faith, long time CPA. Okay. So if you can get the priest the training, and then you can say, set the standard. So what are the most concrete things you can do? First of all, 2 sets of eyes on the money. Whenever you're doing a collection, it's 2 sets of eyes. Never have one person alone with the money. Never have one person counting the money, period. The money is going to go into pre-numbered bags. You get these red bags with the serial numbers.
Yeah.
The money is going to go into that bag. Go right in the bag till you can count it. 2 people in the bag. And then when it's time to count it, at least 2 people, rotating. It's not husband and wife. Try to get 2 people who don't like one another. Then they'll
right.
Count the money. And then 2 people on the money.
Get a liberal and conservative.
And there you go. There you go.
A Trump supporter and a never Trumper. They count the money. Just kidding.
So, and then 2 people taking it to the bank. First thing, 2 people on the money. Just do that. If you can get people to give, say through Faith Direct, or some other way where it's taken out of your account and put in the church account.
Direct deposit.
That's even better, because now you're eliminating the money. Money is really hard to account.
Eliminating cash.
I'm sorry, yeah. Eliminate the cash. That's a very good way to put it. Eliminate the cash. And even checks, you got to take the checks to the bank. Take it out of your account. Account direct to direct. Direct from your account, direct to the parish account.
Wouldn't you think that the amount of a percentage, like the percentage of an annual revenue of a parish is like 25 or 50% cash now and like 50% direct deposit? I don't know, but you would think the cash percentage has gone way down. I mean, I don't give cash. I don't put anything in I do everything direct deposit. Right. I would think younger generation do, but very few young people go to church anymore. So, but just every week I see that collection plate going around. I'm just saying, how much is actually going in there?
Right. Well, what about if you're at a parish that you have mostly people who come from another country, and they're working manual jobs or whatever, and they're paid in cash.
Yeah.
So I bet if you go to say
the Latino community is probably not doing
more cash, I would presume. Okay. So so you're handling the cash as it comes in. First thing. The next thing is, okay, you got that bank statement. It has to be reconciled by someone who doesn't have a dog in the fight. Where they're reconciling the bank statement and they're reconciling to the account. Okay? Basically, if you're not reconciling the checkbook, you got a problem. The third thing is, if it's you have large checks, say over maybe 5,000, 2 signatures.
2 signatures.
2 signatures for checks over a certain amount. It'll be the pastor and maybe the head of the finance council.
Oh, so sorry. So, all right. So somebody donates $100,000 to the parish.
Right. It gets
and they have to cash. They have to deposit. That's
fine. Go deposit.
Check.
That's fine.
So what do you mean by 2 signatures?
You need to pay the guy who's paving the parish parking lot. Sends a bill for $7,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's going to require 2 signatures. The pastor and
on a check. Are there 2 lines?
Yeah.
Really?
They'll give you a check with 2 lines.
Okay. So you have to request a check that actually has 2. So it's probably a different checkbook.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if I've ever seen a check with 2 lines, but okay, that makes sense. It's good.
Okay.
Then it's requiring 2 signatures.
That's right.
Okay.
Every payment that goes out, it's got to have a receipt, and it's got to be checked. Now, who cares about the $10 stuff, right? But Father's going to submit an expense report at the end of the month. He's going to have He's going to either have a credit card and have to give the receipts or whatever for the parish.
Yeah.
He runs out and makes a sick call. He buys gas.
Yeah.
Well, somebody has to double check that.
Yeah.
And it's got to be somebody the pastor does not employ. There's got to be the finance council, somebody, to make sure that's appropriate. So it's in, out, and then what happens while it's there. If you have petty cash, you lock it up. If you have a large asset, so for example, a priest in Massachusetts, I think it was a snowblower or a lawnmower or something. He would construction equipment. He would buy parish, construction stuff used around the house, and he took it home with him. Actually, it wasn't his house. He was living with an older parish secretary and her 2 daughters. And he had all sorts of stuff in their garage that belonged to the parish. Well, he bought this physical asset with the parish credit card. Where is it? Why'd you need it? Where is it? That sort of thing. So you should have a physical inventory at least annually.
So he's buying a lawnmower with the parish credit card and then selling it and taking it?
He had a at that person's house, he was using the garage, and then he rented a storage locker. And in the storage locker, he also had ammo for a gun. They never found the gun, though. I'm not sure what the deal. He pleaded guilty and got probation. But again,
how was he benefiting? It was just like, was he not selling the stuff?
No.
And like,
I think he had some sort of hoarder complex.
Okay.
Yeah. So he pleaded guilty and got probation. And they did not consider him a flight risk because during probation, they allowed him to go back to Poland, his native Poland, for Christmas or something.
Yeah, I don't get that. But all right, yeah.
So it's assets coming in, controlling it while it's there. So you're going to keep cash locked up. You're going to have double signatures on large checks.
Right. It's good.
You're going to have segregation, do the inventory. You're going to have segregation of duties. That's the biggest thing, segregation of duties. That means that the person in charge of the accounting for the asset does not have physical possession of the asset. So you have physical possession of a parish asset, and now you want to take it home. Well, it's an asset on the books. You're not just going to go write it off. You know, go to the counter, no, it's not here anymore. The person, and for example, for cash in the bank, the person in charge of the accounting records does not have access to the checkbook. Because if you have access to the checkbook, you have access to the cash.
Yes.
That is that's the kind of some of the basic things, you know, you can do. Another thing some parishes do, they did this in Buffalo, is there is a hotline. So if you suspect financial malfeasance at your parish in the Diocese of Buffalo, because they've had a problem, you can call 1-800-whatever, and you can report it. And that goes not to the chancery. That goes to a separate company that logs it in and then provides it to the chancery. So at least you know it's going to be logged in.
Yeah, interesting.
And then the final thing is parishioners have to say to themselves, doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. And there's a lot more you can do with internal controls, but those are the basics in the time we have. And the last thing is this: use a little common sense. So there was a case out in Mississippi. The priest is still a fugitive from justice. He's been indicted federally. So father has, first of all, in the Catholic Church, all collections are approved by the bishop. If you're going to have a special collection, you need chancery approval. So a priest who's a pastor in Mississippi is trying to raise funds, he says, to build a chapel in his native Mexico. Can you give me some money?
Sounds good.
And that's great. We're going to build a chapel in Mexico. I guess Mexico doesn't have enough chapels. And then, oh, by the way, I have cancer. I need some money for my cancer treatment. And so people give to, just take the chapel first. They give, I think it was $80,000. Man, that's the number that comes to mind. He spends it on Amazon. No chapel. Spends on Amazon.
Like on what?
I can't remember. It's in the indictment. And then he goes to, and some of the money goes to a close male friend, and that close male friend's son in Mexico.
Close male friend.
People can decide how they want to take that.
Okay.
So, next thing that happens is I need money for medical care. I have cancer, and I need to go to Canada for my cancer treatment because there's no cancer places in the United States. I guess the Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins don't do cancer.
They don't work. Okay.
It turns out he has HIV. Okay. Now he raises money for his cancer treatment. What he's really doing is he's going to get care for his HIV.
But
and we want him to
know
get
that
care.
because
they don't know that.
Right.
So people are more likely to give if you have cancer.
Yes.
Okay. Now he says these are expenses that dioceses aren't going to cover. All right. So the assistant pastor at that parish says, "Listen, he's got HIV, he doesn't have cancer. Something's really wrong here." So he suspects something's wrong. So he goes to the bishop, and the bishop doesn't do anything. In fact, what happens here is when Father says, "I have cancer," sends out an email. The bishop forwards that email to the priest in the diocese and says, "Father's going on leave. See attached email." So the bishop knows he has cancer, knows he has HIV, not cancer, but he still forwards that email. Okay, so and this is all in court records. So the assistant pastor goes to Homeland Security and says, "We got a problem here." So Homeland Security does a search warrant on the parish and the chancery and takes the documents. Now we got a problem. So now you don't want the feds involved. So in the end, the pastor is indicted after he flees to his native Mexico, where he's still a fugitive. The bishop of the Diocese of Jackson, I guess I can give the diocese, he signs a non-prosecution agreement with the federal government, saying basically we're going to keep our nose clean. We're not going to do it again. In return, you're not going to prosecute me. Now that's pretty serious. Now, it's kind of a side issue, but so now the bishop has signed basically a plea agreement with the federal government. And I can be happy to provide it. I don't see anybody from Rome doing, what do they call it? What are those visits when Rome comes out to look at your diocese?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
They come out and do an audit.
Yeah,
they want to see what's going on.
It's like a papal nuncio something.
Yeah, they're gonna see what's going on here. So as far as I know, the Vatican didn't send anybody out to the Diocese of Jackson, Mississippi, to look around, see what's going on, because that should be concerning.
Yeah, they're too busy hunting down conservative priests and bishops. But
I don't know if I'm going to go that far, but I find it odd that Bishop Strickland, as far as I know, he hasn't pled guilty to anything. He hasn't been accused of anything.
Oh my gosh,
he hasn't been indicted of anything.
No.
So
he's a white martyr who's now a dear friend.
Right. So I just find that inconsistent.
Yeah, he was. Pope Francis removed Bishop Strickland simply because Bishop Strickland would disagree publicly with things that Pope Francis said, which are not in keeping with the deposit of faith. And the Vatican will not stand for that. And they went after him harshly, and they said, you must recant what you said. And he said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to speak the truth. The most loving thing I can do for Pope Francis is to point out that what you're saying is not necessarily in keeping with the faith. I'm a bishop. I'm a successor of the apostles. I have to defend the truth, and I have to do that. My flock has to know that some of the things you've been saying are not in keeping with the faith, and so they removed him. And at the same time, you have other priests and bishops who have to plead guilty to, federal crimes, and the Vatican does nothing about them at all. So the inconsistency in this papacy has been staggering. Sorry, that was my one monologue here. So.
Well, that's fine. I haven't looked into too much in the Bishop Strickland situation. I do know if you criticize the boss, you're not going to last that long.
Right? No, yeah.
Okay, but again, I'm not disputing it. It's just everybody's got their.
There was no financial element to that.
There's never been a hint of financial.
No,
issues.
There's no financial. This was purely a doctrinal issue.
So I find that odd. So what happened? So the assistant pastor, according to the affidavit, the search warrant affidavit was released, they had a informant. So now everyone knows who the informant is. It turns out it's the associate pastor who, in his belief he's doing what's right, and I think he did do what's right, is I think he self-identifies, right? So everybody's wondering. And then he is transferred parishes. Now he's an associate. At some point he wants to you're going to be a pastor. So then the parish is up in arms that their associate pastor is transferred and it's considered retaliation. Again, in that case, look, priests get moved. I think you just got to live with it. Especially if he's willing to go up against his bishop and pastor. That's the kind of guy you want to move up the ranks and make him a pastor. So I say it's time to, give him a promotion. A similar thing happened in Connecticut, where a assistant pastor, thought the pastor was stealing. And he went to the bishop did not do anything. So the assistant pastor and the secretary hire a private investigator who investigates the pastor. And turns out he owns real estate with a gentleman. It appears he's been stealing funds and lives beyond his means. So then instead of I'm not sure if that assistant pastor took the report to the bishop, but he did take it to the FBI. And then the FBI investigates that priest. The priest ends up pleading guilty. He ends up actually dying in jail of cancer. And then that case led to another case of another priest in that same diocese who was stealing. Eventually, that assistant priest or associate parochial vicar eventually leaves the priesthood because he feels he's been targeted and is being retaliated against.
What are the demographic insights you've gained from your all of these different statistics? Are there trends? We were on the internal controls, but a question I had meant to ask: demographic insights. Is there trends? Age, middle age, liberal, conservative? Is there any kind of common thread that you see there on terms of demographics?
Do you want to bring order and clarity back into your family life? Hey, I got 16 kids and I understand better than anyone we need to do that. So my wife and I, Ashley, we developed a 6-part family management system to do just that. And it's based on concrete business tools and principles that you can apply in the day-to-day running of your household. So please come to wellorderedfamily.com, check out our tools, our books, and most importantly, our one-on-one coaching so that we can work directly with you and customize a program to help your family get to the next level.
Right. Very few start out stealing. Usually, if you look at the paper, I think the biggest bump is 45, right? Right around 45, that's when they start. And that's probably when you hit middle-aged, you get the midlife crisis. That's kind of why. And by that point, you're a pastor. So now you have the opportunity. And you've had about 20 years, if you got ordained young, now you've had about 20 years of doing good. So now you have some rationalization.
You've made deposits. Now it's time.
Yeah, it's time to make that withdrawal. You've lost the 20 pounds. Now it's time for the Sunday. And so the opportunity is now you become a pastor. So it takes about 20 years or so. But very few people start out stealing. That's the first thing. The second is, obviously most priests in America are Anglo, so most of the priests in the study are white. Most are diocesan priests. There is a disproportionate share, I think, of Polish and Irish priests. I think 3 or 4 in my study out of 120 are actually Polish immigrants.
How many?
About 3 or 4, maybe 5 of the priests are actually Polish, like from Poland.
Okay.
Which I thought was disproportionate, I think.
Disproportionately high.
To the number of Polish priests, immigrant priests in the priesthood. The problem is you can't go to the USCCB and say, well, okay, we got so many priests, break it down by how many are Polish immigrants, how many are Irish immigrants.
Could that be because there's certain communities that are just very culturally strong, and so they feel protected by that community? And like, because in the old days, you had like a Polish parish,
right?
You had an Irish parish, you had an Italian parish. If that priest is like extremely important in that community, you know, maybe they feel a little bit more emboldened as opposed to a priest that's in a melting pot, a melting pot parish that doesn't really have as much of a cultural tie.
But the thing is, nowadays, if you're, say, a Polish immigrant priest, and I'm sure there's plenty that are great. Okay, let's get that out. There's plenty that are great. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to a Polish parish. Case in point, there's a Polish immigrant priest in South Dakota. He's either a pastor or an assistant. I think he might have been a pastor somewhere, but at least assistant pastor. And he's caught stealing from the collection plate at the church. So the bishop says, okay, you're now going to be a high school chaplain, and you're going to do weekends at this parish next door. So what he does, he starts stealing from the parish next door. Now, there's no connection to Poland at that parish. Now, he does weird things, like he steals a bunch of money and buys like a grand piano. It's just odd what he stole. So he's finally caught because he's taking money from the parish and taking cash. Nobody can figure out how the cash is being taken. So they put up a camera. They thought it was the pastor. So they put up a camera the pastor didn't know about. And then it's like the chaplain next door who has the key to the room. First of all, there's no reason the assistant pastor has the key to the money room.
Right.
Unless that's where the vestments are held and all that. But there's no reason for the assistant pastor to have a key to the parish. No reason he should have a key to the room, but he did. And there's no reason the first set of cameras didn't work because he would turn them off. So he knew about that. That's poor internal control. So he bought similar red bags, sealable bags. He would rip open the bag, take the 20s, put the rest of the money into the new bag. And that had different numbers. And finally, the parishioners figured out that the numbers were different. And they thought it was a pastor. So they put up the camera that the pastor didn't know about. They catch the chaplain next door. So he's caught with a $50,000 cashier's check at the airport with a one-way ticket back to Poland.
Oh my God!
By IRS special agents. Woo!
Wow!
And he goes to trial, and is found guilty.
Okay.
So that's kind of a long story. I'm not sure it answers your question, but look, there seems to be a preponderance of Polish priests and older Irish priests, like priests in Florida. We have about 4 Irish priests who came over in like the late 1960s from Ireland. And like one guy owned a bar in Ireland. And there was 2 Irish priests, and I think they took their girlfriends to Vegas.
Wow. And
they got caught, and they stole like $700,000 or something.
So in business, I've learned painfully over the years that out of the 3 financial statements that you have, a P&L, a balance sheet, and a cash flow, man, the cash flow statement's where it's at. And it takes a long time for business people to learn that, because the thing that people hand them from a management standpoint is the P&L.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where you're like, how much is my payroll? How much is my rent? How much are my cost of goods? How much is my electric bill? Just all, that's where they're living. I'm amazed at how many business people do not understand that P&L is not necessarily the same as cash.
Right.
And because if we're in big inventory business, you got to pay a bunch of money for inventory. It sits in a warehouse for a year. And the cash is gone. Like when I see I used to have a big warehouse before we outsourced our fulfillment, and I see the boxes of books, and I think that's like boxes of cash. And it doesn't appear on the darn P&L until you sell it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you learn over time to manage with a cash flow statement. Otherwise, you can really get yourself in trouble by not tracking the cash. So my question is I'm curious if the parishes are using like QuickBooks or something, probably a very modest accounting system. And is that church secretary or the church accountant just printing out a P&L? And is that what's going to the pastor? Is that what's going to the finance committee? And maybe, a cash flow statement would be a better thing to be looking at. I don't know if it works the same way at Parish, but certainly in a business, I tell, my business friends, study your darn cash flow statement a lot more than your P&L or balance sheet. Those can be deceptive, but cash flow is not going to be deceptive. So I wonder if priests spend time, or finance committee, I should say, because priest is usually embezzling, but the finance committee or the parish council, are they getting the right financial statements, particularly the cash flow statements?
That is a good question. I don't know, but that is a very good summary of the cash flow statement. Income is not cash, and expenses are not cash outflow. And again, look, I have 120 cases in my study. There's been probably 100,000 priests at the time of my study. So my study is not statistically significant, right? It's not statistically valid. It's just the cases I've uncovered. But there are a lot of them. But, so the vast majority of priests are honest, vast majority of brothers and nuns are honest. But I love that the cash flow statement came into effect in the 1980s because of the bank failure of Continental Illinois. Plenty of cash, audited by Ernst & Ernst, a CPA firm. Plenty of income, lots of income. 6 weeks after the financial statements were issued, they go bankrupt because they ran out of cash.
And people are like, how can that be? They had profit.
That's right. So that's when you went to the cash flow statement, which was first required on the CPA exam in May of 89.
Really?
So when I took the exam in November of 88, I knew if I passed, I wouldn't have to learn the cash flow statement.
Yeah.
That's what we're all worried about. Wonderful statement. I really hammer it with my students.
Yeah.
And you got to know how to make one. We introduced an intermediate accounting. Really, you got to be able to make one.
Yeah.
And you have to understand what it means.
Yeah. In fact, every publisher out there that's ever gone bankrupt, and there's a lot, most publishing companies don't make it historically, all the way back to Ben Franklin kind of thing. It's interesting from an accounting standpoint. You would see that like most of them that go bankrupt were very profitable, and their inventory is where their cash went, and it's sitting on a book. It's sitting in an inventory, and they go bankrupt, and they're shocked because like I have profit. Look, I have 10% profit. Yeah, and your cash is sitting in boxes right now. So they don't get that. And so if I was on a finance committee, I'd say cash flow, buddy. I need the cash, only the cash flow. And I mean, of course, the others, but that's the silver bullet. That's how you're going to really track it.
And can I mention one more thing real quick about internal controls? It would really be interesting and I think this has been suggested, I've read a couple articles on it. What about if each parish, there's one diocesan accounting system. So each parish is using it, and then the chancery has real-time access. And if you have that data, now you can start doing some data analysis for trends. Why is this parish have more people coming to Mass, but there's less cash? There's less direct, there's faith directs 50% over here, 5% over there. They're pretty much similar parishes. Why? And if you have that data, and you're only going to get that data if you have immediate access to the system. Every time a parish makes a payroll deposit with the government, files their, quarterly reports, the diocese can see it. That's when you can really start getting some control. And by the way, watch the second collections. There was a case. Can I go one more case? I don't know how much time we got.
Yeah, we got plenty.
We had a case in California. I think Diocese Santa Rosa, the bishop's my hero. Priest was known for having unsolicited second collections. So he's driving in his car and has 17 grand in cash in a bag. and he gets in a car accident, breaks his leg. He's fine, thank God. And he's transported to the hospital, but the cops are like, what's the bag of cash for? He goes, that's my salary. And they're like, well, these guys get paid in cash? That seems kind of weird. So he's in the emergency room, clutching the bag like it's the third secret of Fatima.
Okay, sorry. Oh, sorry. Third secret. All right, that's good. Keep going. All right. I got the picture in my head of him just clutching. All right.
Well, they're setting the leg, I guess. I don't know.
The third secret. All right. Keep going.
So then somebody calls the bishop's office and says, it's a small diocese, right? And, you got a priest in here clutching a bag of cash, and he says it's a salary. And the bishop's like, well, that seems kind of odd. First of all, he's concerned that there's a priest there who's hurt. So he goes down to the hospital, and it's like, well, what's up with the bag? And he admits that he's been stealing money from the parish. Oh, and by the way, there's $50,000 in my bedroom. So the bishop goes and collects the $50,000, and the bishop really has maximum disclosure to the parish. He puts out 2 long letters, and nobody's up there saying Father is innocent and all that. Mm-hmm. And I believe it's been a couple of years, but I believe Father was laicized. Mm. Now, the amount that he stole, he would never get prosecuted for. So the fact that the bishop did not push for prosecution, I don't care. He never would have gone to jail. But he did recover as much money as he could, and he did file for laicization on Father. Mm. He didn't say, well, we'll send Father here, we'll send Father there. He's like, I can't trust him. And so he laicizes them.
Well, yeah.
Now, again, which also is another thing about internal control I forgot to mention earlier. Priests living alone is asking for trouble. You're asking for trouble. You got to figure out a way for even diocesan priests to live 2 or 3 at a parish. And when I was young, I was kind of scandalized that priests had housekeepers. I'll be doing their own trash, but I was young. And a lot of things have changed since then. You got to have a housekeeper who's keeping the house and kind of looking for stuff. That priest had $50,000 in his bedroom.
Gosh.
If you had another priest there, it's like, why is this $10,000, on the dining room table? Or why is he always hoarding this stuff? Or why are we having these special collections?
Yeah.
That's an internal control. So there was a priest in, I think, Akron who had $500,000 in his rectory. And he had skimmed it from a drug and alcohol rehab center he had started in around 1970. And his rationalization was he didn't, he had retired from the board and all that. No, he didn't skim from the parish. He skimmed from the rehab center. People would do free work for the rehab center, and he would submit a bill and get the money that these people didn't want to begin with. But he was doing it because he wanted to make sure the rehab center had money in case they needed it. Nobody at the rehab center knew that. It wasn't on the rehab center's books, but that's the rationalization.
You think he was just going to spend it in retirement? He's just making his own nest egg? Is that what that's?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But that is what he told the government and told the court, is that I was worried because I didn't like the way it was being run, and I want to make sure that they have money if they need it. Mm-hmm. And the only reason he got caught because he was structuring cash transaction in the bank, because he had heard from someone that the government was going to switch out the $20 bills, and the old $20 bills weren't going to be valid currency. So you got to get that money in the bank right away. But if you deposit more than $10,000, somebody's going to file a form with Uncle Sam. Mm-hmm. So the problem is banks can file suspicious activity reports, not just cash transaction reports. Mm. And the IRS went out there and talked to him, and it's like, yeah, I did. Oh, by the way, I got half a million in my house. And they're like, okay, we're gonna write a warrant, and we're gonna get it. So don't take it anywhere. And the priest had his brother was an attorney, was with him. He says, look, I'll go get it, and I'll bring it. And so they did turn it over to the court. Now, he pleaded guilty. They fought over the amount of time sentencing. The government didn't like the amount of time, and the other side thought it was too much. I think it was 6 months, which means you might not even go to prison. It might just put you in halfway. In the end, Father was allowed to retire and was returned to retirement ministry. Mm-hmm. So you want him to say weekend mass and all that, that's fine. But he lived modest. He lived in a kind of an inner city, lower income parish, didn't spend any money on himself. And I think he go to have lunch with or dinner with his mom every night or something, if I remember correctly. Mm. But don't quote me on that.
Yeah. Does all this stuff that you've done your research on? Does it dampen your faith?
No, not at all. Not, you know, it was kind of funny. My wife asked me about that. My wife hates hearing these stories. She doesn't want to hear them anymore, but you know, that's kind of the way it is. It kind of got me at the beginning. It was a little damaging, but look, in the end, St. Francis reformed the church. And really, the job of the church is to reform me. It's not my job to reform the church. But this is just my little gift to the church, so to speak, in order to maybe help them and revise some things. Has not affected my faith. I go to a third order Carmelite group and with my mother-in-law. And we always make sure I pick out one priest to pray for. But it's like, you know, Father so-and-so, we need to pray for him. He's going to trial and he stole all this money. And be like, well, no, it has not dampened my faith. It's the Catholic Church is a great institution. It brings salvation to the people, and hopefully all this helps.
Beyond parish embezzlement, there's a lot of other nonprofit institutions out there in the Catholic market or Catholic world. And there is, without getting into specifics, you and I have talked about some specifics off the air, but I don't want to name certain big groups that people are known or major influencers. I don't want to get into that, but let's talk in general about the problem of transparency. So these big groups, explain how they're able to essentially avoid transparency as these nonprofits.
Okay, both for Catholic and non-Catholic, or you want to stick with Catholic?
Well, I guess both, and distinguish if you want.
Sure, okay. So the first thing you have to realize is churches, well, if you're a nonprofit entity, you file what's called a Form 990 every year with the government. It's a nonprofit tax return. Nonprofits are not taxed federal income tax. They got to pay employment taxes on their employees. They have to withhold like everybody else, but they don't pay income tax on donations. If they have unrelated business entities, like they're renting out a hall, they do, but that's something else. Churches do not file 990s. It's a separation of church and state. Okay. You also have entities called church affiliates, which are not churches, but they fall under that church umbrella, and so the IRS says you don't have to file. Every year, the IRS gives the USCCB a letter. It's their tax exempt letter. Every year it comes out, and the letter says that, Dear USCCB, any organization covered in the official Catholic directory, named in the official Catholic directory, is covered under this tax exempt status. So little parish out in the middle of nowhere doesn't have to file their own. It's in the official Catholic directory. Okay, we're good. The problem is if you're especially a church affiliate and maybe even diocese, you're not filing 990s. So there's a lot of information that normal nonprofits have or other secular nonprofits have to provide, such as donations, expenditures, assets, and especially who they're doing business with, their top 5 contractors, and the salaries of their top highest paid people. And that's, if you're going to donate money, those are things you probably want to know if you're donating a significant amount of money to you.
You want to know how much the top people are making? Yeah. There's also a spot on the 990s, which I've studied a lot, where you have to list affiliate organizations.
Yes.
And so you can see if the money's just looping around to closely associated things. Does this nonprofit, is it doing business with the chairman of the board's for-profit company?
Yes.
How much money's being exchanged back and forth like that? And when you start looking, you say, oh, what's this affiliate company? You start looking up. Amazingly, so often you will see that it's a for-profit company,
yes.
Which is not illegal per se. It's just it's a matter of degree, I suspect.
Correct.
But if you're a church affiliated company, if you can get classified as that, then you don't have to file this 990.
You don't file 990 just like your church, and you're really not answerable to the bishops because you're not under that tax exempt letter.
Has there been a lawsuit on this, like to challenge like the constitutionality, or I don't know what even the cause, because I guess maybe it'd be a statutory federal case saying, is this organization get the same status as a church? Because it's not a church, it's just church affiliate. But I mean,
you got to go back to the Internal Revenue Code. What does the code section say? And then go to the Internal regulations, right? And then what are the federal regulations on it? But here's kind of the transparency issue, that if you go to one of these affiliates, they will put out, say, glossy financial statements, but they don't really tell you anything. Here's our income, here's our expenses. They may not give you a balance sheet. They're definitely not going to give you a cash flow statement, nor are they going to give you the auditor's report. You can ask for the audited financial statements, and you're going to get a report from the auditor. Now, granted, auditors, all they do is provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements and accompanying notes are free of material misstatement. Not all misstatement, and it's not absolute assurance. And that the financial statements are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principle. Now, that's not absolute, but it is a lot. And the auditor is going to opine on whether they relied on the internal controls. And they're also going to provide management a letter saying, hey, you got a clean opinion, this is what we found. Or we didn't get a clean opinion, this is what we found. Reading the audit report is very instructive. And so if you're a church affiliate, you're not giving the 990s. In fact, I would probably like to see a 990 more than I would audited financial statements, because that's filed under a penalty of perjury with the government. But to just get a glossy financial statement with no backup and not the actual report is less transparent than I think most people should want.
I'm not going to name names, but but there are the most highly respected and powerful organizations in the Catholic Church, and some of the biggest influencers that I know that I have been told are running nonprofits that are sizable, but they're making $1 million a year doing it. And they get this special status. So the donors, the little old grandma who's giving her $100 a month, she doesn't know that the guy's making $1 million a year running this thing.
Right.
And I think if she did know that, I'm not even saying that she would know to look up the 990s, but other people would, and people would talk.
Right.
And because they're church affiliate, they don't have to reveal in that little section on the 990 the compensation of the top paid people. I think people would be scandalized if they knew how much money people are making running Catholic nonprofits. And by the way, if you're running a for-profit company like in the Catholic marketplace and it's for-profit and you own it, go make however much you want. That's not illegal. It's not necessarily immoral either, depending on what how you want to handle that morally. But a nonprofit, oh man, you're making big bucks running a nonprofit, and you don't really have to report it. That's the kicker, because it's a lack of transparency, and the little donors might change their opinion about whether to donate.
It might. Now, if you're a for-profit entity, you have to justify your salary to the board.
Sure, absolutely.
Right, and if you don't make the money, you're not going to be there.
You're not going to make it.
Nonprofit, you're relying on donors. Now, granted, you're a nonprofit hospital. You got people paying for the care and things like that. We understand that. But I'm not going to give a name. But I remember asking a Catholic nonprofit that's a church affiliate that brought in one year $115 million. $115 million. And I asked them for their financial statement. They said no. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
And they don't file 990s.
Yeah.
Another one made, say, $10-12 million a year. If you look on their glossy financial statement, it says, hey, if you want the full report, just let us know, and we'll send it to you. So I call them up. Hey, can I get the report? Oh, no, it's too onerous to send. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So there's some problems.
There's problems.
And
but I'm going to give you some good news.
Good.
I want everybody to have some good news. First of all, the USCCB, they put out their audited financial statements. You can go on their website. It's right there.
Yes.
Great transparency.
Yes.
Unfortunately, they also have the same auditors as Planned Parenthood, which I think they should make them choose one or the other.
Wow.
Now, that does mean that people who work on the USCCB audit also work on the Planned Parenthood audit. But it's KPMG. This is a CPA firm. It's I don't think.
Why do you think that's a problem?
Well, look, you can't serve two masters. I mean, I can't think of any organization that is more antithesis to the message of the Catholic Church than Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
Now, I am not saying there's a conflict, but look, I think the USCCB ought to force them to choose. If you want our money, you're not going to deal with that.
Interesting. I see. Yeah.
There's plenty of, the church talks about socially responsible investing.
Yes.
And I totally, no problem with that. We don't want to earn money from businesses that are contrary to the faith. Certainly understand that. But why are you purchasing items when there's an easily available alternative, or purchasing services?
That's right.
When there's an easily available alternative. But let's go back to the good news. The good news is they're transparent. They give audited financial statements. And it's right on the web. I had a graduate student about 3 years ago, a long-suffering graduate student who, actually I think I had a couple of them, and they downloaded 5 years worth of audited financial statements of every diocese in the United States. 5 years. And I think all but a couple, I think including Steubenville for a couple of years, I think it was Vegas 1 year, did not have it. So if you want to go to your diocese, you're going to find the audited financial statements of the chancery, and it's right there. Very transparent. You don't have to call anybody. You don't have to write a letter. It's right there. And I'm sure they want you to look at it.
Yeah.
And that's good. That is great news.
Yeah.
Some more good news, if you don't mind me saying, because I always like to be positive about this stuff.
Please.
The USCCB has been wrestling with the issue of financial transparency at least since the mid-2000s. Okay. They have an excellent guide to diocesan financial administration on their web. Not only do diocesan officials have it, everyone can look at it. That's great. In 2007, they put out a letter regarding guidance on diocesan financial issues, and they mention a lot of the cases, and I provided that. I just recently provided it to you. So you can post it to your viewers. It's great. In 2007, they came out with a letter regarding financial administration, and they mentioned a lot of the cases that have come up as of then. And they mentioned the great article written by West and Zach from Villanova University. And they don't pull punches. Mm-hmm. So the church has not tried to put this under the radar. They haven't tried to put it under the carpet. They're trying to be transparent. They have great guidance out for dioceses. That's some more really great news, and we should all be happy with that. Also, we mentioned before that the two programs at Catholic U and Villanova. Great programs. The priests need some more help.
Yeah.
So
it'd be great if dioceses almost encouraged or mandated, getting a certificate in that before becoming a pastor or something like that. That would be a great kind of service to do to these younger priests that need the help. When we were eating lunch right before here, sharing a pizza, filming on a Friday during Lent, so we had nice cheese pizza. You mentioned something about you requested the documents from a Satanic church, and I'm like, you don't get to have this conversation every day. Tell us about that. That's kind of incredible.
Oh, yeah. In 2019, I got a call from EWTN News. I had a thing where I'd be on there every now and then when I was at Catholic U. When they were desperate and needed somebody, they'd call me. And at that time, the Satanic Temple, which was a nonprofit, which means they filed 990s, they had just gotten status as a church in the eyes of the IRS. Mm-hmm. Thus, you don't have to file 990s. And also, then you're not eligible for, you're not subject to property taxes, sales taxes, all that. But just like a regular nonprofit. But the big difference is you don't have to file 990s.
Yeah, and we don't know what the high priest is going to make.
Right. And so I kind of leery doing that research. But basically, the Satanic Temple, they're not worshiping Satan. They're really agnostics or atheists. Mm-hmm. And so the Satan is really knowledge. So it's a substitute for knowledge. But they're not praying to a higher power. Okay, that's their golden calf, I guess, for a better term.
I mean, it's almost like the church of anti-religion.
Yes. And the thing about a church, when you think of a church, it's a church that believes in a higher power. So whether you're Methodist or Buddhist or Hindus or any Muslim, house of worship, Catholic, you believe in a higher power, right? There's a deity. Well, the Satanic Temple does not believe in a deity. Satan is a substitute for knowledge. Okay, so they're really atheist. So my point was, how are they a church? And so I was able to call and get their tax-exempt status, their application for tax-exempt for church status. It was a 33-page document. And I think I got that after the interview, and I sent it to EWTN. We never followed up. But it was interesting because they're not saying they believe in a deity, but now they have a church. But what does that do for them? Well, now they can hold quote-unquote church services. They could be chaplains in the military.
Oh gosh.
Which means, okay, I'm Reverend so-and-so from the Satanic Temple. I'm going to have Sunday services for everybody in boot camp or whatever if you want to go. They're eligible for military chaplaincies. So that means they can be on a military salary. They can have rank. They'll be on health, government health care. They'll get pensions if they stay to retirement. Their churches are exempt from filing 990s, right? So that removes a level of transparency. So.
Unbelievable. And so, it seems like that seems like almost something that the Trump administration could try to handle or something, because purely from probably the historic constitutional definition of a religion, they don't even qualify because of what their doctrine or lack of doctrine is. Now, I think, and maybe it's a different conversation, but Church of Satan is one thing, but if you call yourself like a devil worshiper, that might be a little different. Like if you're worshiping the devil,
sure. But then you qualify.
But the way that the Church of Satan is organized, like they're basically atheists.
Right.
And I think they basically teach that Satan is a mythological representative of being freed from the constraints that religion impose upon you.
Right.
And so how do they get religious status when they're really anti-religion?
Right.
And so that's something that somebody seems to be able, somebody should be able to handle that.
Yeah, but here's the issue. First of all, that's a kind of an internal IRS thing, like a civil service IRS thing. The IRS has bigger problems. So I have two areas of research. One is the priest fraud stuff, which is fun, interesting. I hope that's my gift. That's really my gift I'm not sure the church bishop thinks it's a gift, but I think it's a gift. The other is basically the federal tax gap.
Yeah.
So the IRS fails to collect $600 billion a year in federal taxes. And so the Trump administration just let a lot of new people go. So they got a $600 billion problem they probably got to solve first.
Yeah, I had your documents. Oh, here it is. This state should close tax gaps when federal grants run dry.
Right.
Something you just published recently.
Yeah, but yeah.
So you want to give people the gist of that? Because it is interesting.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting. The federal government last year the federal government ran a $1.9 trillion budget deficit. And you can't do that. We're 36 trillion in the hole. We're digging deeper, 1.9 trillion every year. But the government gives out $1 trillion in grants a year to state and local governments. Basically, the monies go to the state, and the states disperse it to the locals, and that includes $645 billion for Medicaid. And some of those grants go to resettle migrants, and we saw the USCCB, they had to lay a bunch of people off. Houston Catholic Charities laid a bunch of people off. Catholic Relief Services get a bunch of grants. They just laid off, and they expect their budget to go down by half. So the government funds a lot of services that the church provides. And thank God the church is there to provide it. Mm-hmm. But the money's not going to be there. So the point of the article was, and that I wrote that before President Trump came into office second time. And it was published the day he froze the grants. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty decent timing.
And there's a lawsuit now, right? Didn't the
there's plenty of lawsuits.
Sue the USCCB. Trump?
And the reason is the USCCB has, what they do with a lot of grants is you expend the money and then you send a bill and you get the money. Right, so you're out your own money first. Mm. And so the USCCB has dispersed their own funds.
That's why they're suing.
To resettle people. And there's a big difference if the president wants to say, well, look, we're out of money. I got to cut this $1.9 trillion. And so everything's got to stop. That's one thing. If you're going to say, well, you've already, in good faith, expend this money under a contract, a legal binding agreement.
Right. And
we're not going to pay. I'll see you in court. That's a problem.
Yeah. And when I heard this, that the USCCB was suing, I was, my wife and I were talking, and it sounded outrageous initially, like why, how can they sue? Trump doesn't have to give federal funding if he doesn't want to. But then I said, nah, there must be some cause of action of a contractual problem. Mm-hmm. There must be a breach of contract claim. Yeah. I'm not saying it's actual, but at least a claim of some kind of reliance that the USCCB has had on these grants.
Yes.
It's the only way a good lawyer would have any chance at all of prevailing on this. And that's what it is. They spend the money, and they've had some kind of either actual contract going back forever, or some kind of at least implied contract through documentations or whatnot. I don't know. I have not studied that case. I don't know anything about it. But that's the way these things usually would work. Is there's at the very minimum a reasonable person is relying on this reimbursement. Right. They spend the money. Now Trump says you can't get reimbursed. There's a lawsuit. That makes a little. Is that roughly right?
Yeah. So what happens here is, and I wish I could tell you more about this, because the USCCB has in the last 10 years, the USCCB has brought in about $900 million with these reimbursements. Wow. That's a lot of money. Now they're not keeping it. No. They keep a piece of it, right? Because everything kind of goes through, and it's dispersed to local Catholic charities who do the really good work of resettling people. And thank God they're there to do it, and we all wish them the best. But that's a lot of money. That's probably the majority of their budget.
Almost
close
$1 billion.
$1 billion over 10 years, give or take. And so I sent a letter to the USCCB. Hey, can I have a copy of the contract? Both contracts? I'd like to read them. And I get a letter back from their attorneys, or from the USCCB, I think their general counsel. Dear Dr. Warren, thank you for your letter and your interest. Well, you're welcome. You're welcome for my interest. Those contracts that we entered into with the U.S. government, they are available from the U.S. government.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And we will be happy to work with them to provide you the contract.
But they have to have it.
No, they got to have it.
Come on.
Then I file a FOIA both with state, I think it might have been HHS. At least with state, might have been I filed with two separate agencies, haven't heard anything. But again, see, now you're supposed to do your FOIAs through a portal. I just mail it. I just mail them. So then they get lost. Everybody's working at home. So I have not followed up. But I would love to be able to provide you, hey, here are the two contracts. You're an attorney. Why don't you read it and you can tell me what you think? But they won't give me the contract. And I think that's a little...
lacking transparency.
That's a very good way to put it. I was trying to think of a better word. It lacks transparency. Why don't you just put the contract on the web? It is a major source of funding. Why not put it on the web?
And everybody can see it. Now it's headlines. You're suing them, and show us why.
Yes.
Is there a filed lawsuit? Wouldn't it be in the complaint? Or at least
my presumption, you would have to at least refer to it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's in federal court. You can go on Pacer and download everything for 10 cents a page.
Yeah.
So it
might be there.
I got to find a grant, but it's not going to come from the government to download all that.
I wonder who would be more inefficient in providing you with documentation, the USCCB or the federal government?
Oh, that's a good question. So since I retired from the IRS, I've filed about 60 FOIAs, and they've usually been pretty good. Things, got kind of slow during, COVID, but they've been pretty good. They've given me some really good information. By the way, before I forget, there's an other news website, The Pillar, that I wanted to mention. They have done more coverage on these fraud cases than anyone else in America. They've been very good to me. They've given me a lot of time to express my view. They've done great coverage on the USCCB, and they've also done really good coverage on some of the issues at the Vatican regarding finances. And so whatever you think of the Holy Father, and we hope he gets better, one of the first things he did when he came into office is we have to bring financial accountability.
Yes.
Because all the money that gets wasted is less money on the poor. And that's a really good way to look at it. So, so he brought in, he appointed the first ever Vatican Inspector General. It's like, how cool a job is that? To be the Vatican Inspector General.
Wow.
Of course, he got fired after about a year.
And who was that?
Some guy from KPMG, and he was an Italian guy. Forgot his name. Then they bring in somebody else.
What was the whole situation with Cardinal Burke being removed? No, not Cardinal Burke. I'm sorry. The Australian who was in charge of the Vatican.
Oh, George Peel.
Yeah, Cardinal Peel.
I haven't followed it that much. Obviously, his conviction was overturned.
And then he dies.
Yeah.
There's conspiracy theories that run around.
Plenty of conspiracy theories. I have not read the book, but he was Pope Francis' point man on trying to bring financial transparency to the Vatican. And because of the court case in which he was eventually found innocent, his efforts were derailed.
Cardinal Pell. We were saying
Cardinal Pell. George Pell. George Pell. May he rest in peace.
Amazing, saintly man. Yeah. Sorry, we said Peel.
Peel, I know. So Pell, may he rest in peace. But he's a holy man, but also very good at finances. He understood, I'm not sure what his background was, but he understood books and records. And so what any good accounting system should do is you should be able to take the balance sheet, let's say, and go all the way back to all the transactions that make up that balance sheet, right? Go back to the balance sheet, to the ledgers, to the general journal, and back to the actual source document.
Every debit and credit.
Go source document to statement, and then go statement to source document. That is what a great accounting system does. And what the Vatican should do, and they can't do, the Pentagon can't do this, by the way, but the Vatican definitely should be able to do it. The Vatican was known for having off-the-books accounts. So you're working at one Vatican office, and they have the balance sheet. But, we got these accounts over there. Oh, they're not on the balance sheet. That's for our special use. No. Everything, you got to have a culture where everything goes on the statements. Every bank account is on the balance sheet. No exceptions. And every transaction gets a debit and a credit, and it's recorded. None of this putting money in a suitcase and taking it to your brother or cousin or whatever in a Swiss bank account. None of that. And that's what's been happening. And the Pope's been trying to put a kibosh on that.
Well, if he's trying to put a kibosh on it, why did he remove Cardinal Pell?
Well, the problem is Cardinal Pell had that court case. And so he had to go back to Australia to, my understanding, I didn't follow the issue that much, but Cardinal Pell had to go back to Australia to face the charges in which he was wrongly convicted.
Wrongly convicted.
And then
it was overturned. His conviction was overturned.
I don't know what he did afterwards. I presume after a situation like that, he was in solitary confinement, probably for his own safety. And I don't know.
Look, the conspiracy theory, if people are wondering, I mean, I'm not endorsing it or whatever, but the conspiracy theory is that the Vatican set the Australia mafia on him to make these accusations so that he would have to be removed from the investigation into the Vatican Bank.
Yeah, that's a conspiracy theory.
That's a big one.
You hear a lot of conspiracy theories. I don't know.
I
haven't heard any. Nobody has any proof.
Yeah,
well, he got a lot of allegations.
He was a holy man wrongly accused. That's what I do know.
Yes, and thank God his name was cleared. Yes. And may he rest in peace. And he started doing some really good work at the Vatican. Yeah, you got to be able to, at least maybe not a whole Vatican financial statement, but however many offices are at the Vatican, I forgot what they call them.
Dicasteries.
Dicasteries. Okay, however many dicasteries there are, everybody should have a balance sheet, statement of revenues and expenditures, because they don't have income, right? I mean, it's and cash flow.
Do they follow GAAP?
Well, they have IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards.
Okay. Is GAAP U.S.?
GAAP is U.S. IFRS is non-U.S.
Is it basically the same thing?
There are some differences, but pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And there might be differences in depreciation and all that. And there's always been talks of merging the two. Mm-hmm. But, of course, we want GAAP.
GAAP is generally accepted accounting principles, just so people know.
But the other thing is that if you're an SEC, if you're on an exchange, U.S. exchange, you got to follow GAAP. Mm-hmm. And so if you say, well, now we're going to use IFRS, well, SEC would have to sign off on that.
I see. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, this fascinating. We were talking about the transparency and the need for, more transparency in church financial matters. As we kind of wrap up, we've been at this for a while. I mean, is there any last kind of advice that you would give to church officials, or more importantly, I think, to parish councils, to finance committees? We've talked about it a little bit, but let's end on an optimistic note of like how the church can improve, how it can help. That's right. How policies, internal controls, diocesan policies, education can really help these guys stay out of trouble.
Absolutely. And tell you, and there should be a lot of hope. First, if you're a pastor who has a problem, you got to get help. Maybe the first step is going to see your own lawyer, who's going to look after your interests while you look after the interests of your parish. Okay, but there's a lot of help out there. If you are a financial professional and you have any time or inclination, ask your pastor whether you could be on, whether he needs help on each parish has to have a financial council. That's according to Vatican. That's canon law. That's canon law. See if you can help. Even if it's just counting the money, even if it's just reconciling the bank account, see if you can kind of put your shoulder to the wheel. Number two. So the pastors, get help if you need it. Don't be afraid to ask your parishioners to help. And don't be afraid to ask your bishop, hey, I need some additional training. Can I call up somebody from that program at Catholic U or Villanova or wherever and have them come in to teach a course? Maybe it's going to be a course offered in continuing ed or something like that. Okay. Don't be afraid of audits. If you're a pastor and auditors show up, welcome them. They are here to help. They really are. If I was a bishop, number one, I would ban your priests from going to casinos. Ban them from gambling.
Yeah.
ban them from gambling.
Yeah.
For their own good. And if you are a priest who gambles and you figure you can't live without it, that's a sign you need some help.
All right. On that note, I think the biggest growing addiction in the world right now is not pornography. That's probably already here. It's the sports gambling with the college kids on the phone. Mm-hmm. What are those websites, Kevin? DraftKings. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, they are programmed to get kids addicted. My point: these young men who have been in college the last 5 years, they're all betting $5 on every football game. You know, I mean, I'm not saying they are. I'm saying, but
right.
Statistically, these young men are doing this left and right, and it's just a click of the button. So they're forming the little habit of gambling in college and seminary. You know, they're putting $2, $5, $10 on this basketball game or whatever, and it's all fun and innocent. And that is setting the path to become a serious gambler when you're a pastor with parish funds. So I think we're actually this research shows a lot of problem, but the culture of gambling is at an all-time high with young men because of the sports gambling.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. If you can, try to group your priests so they have some sort of common life. If nothing else, if you come home and you have a bad day, there's somebody to complain to, the pastor, or you have common meals, common prayer. If you got a problem, they can look out for one another.
Yeah.
And if never be afraid to ask for help. Because there's a lot of help out there.
Yeah.
And you just have to ask.
Well, this is amazing research you've done. You have such sound advice for people. I mean, you're digging through stuff that other people talk about and complain about. You actually write letters and request documents. You actually gather the data. And this incredible research you've done is a real benefit to bishops, the diocesan councils and committees that need to control these things, to parishes, to priests, finance committees. So I hope, I just wish you the best of luck in continuing all the research you're doing, because ultimately the truth shall set you free, right? I mean, it's a cliche, but it's true. And so I hope that the institutional church will listen to people like you. So keep it going, man.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
It's been awesome. Thanks for being here, buddy. Thank you.
Hey, thanks guys for checking out the Conor Gallagher Show. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, or comment, or whatever you got to do to support it. And I appreciate that very much.